Ladies and gentlemen, on the 20th of July, 1969, Neil Armstrong addressed the world with the following words: "One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind." On that day, mankind achieved an incredible feat. And to this day, this still symbolizes humanity going beyond our planet. For the people in the audience and the people at home, I challenge you to all look up the people that to this day have set foot on the moon. Looking at this, it becomes evident that even though this endeavor represented entire humanity, the incredible diversity of the human race was unfortunately left out. Traditionally, the aerospace sector has been an industry dominated by men. However, I'm glad to say that since the early days of flight, there's been incredible strides that have been made in this sector. Ladies and gentlemen, it's with great pride and joy that I welcome you today at the Aerospace Diversity Day, complementing each other. Today is a day we take a moment to acknowledge the work done for the people behind these incredible developments. The most recent and apparent examples of this is the recent developments in the male-female ratios of the industry. The VSV has today and in the past taken a stance in supporting the growing amount of women that choose to study aerospace engineering. May this be through organizing events like this, or the predecessor of this event, the Revolutionary Aerospace Women event, where students are enabled to come in contact with inspiring speakers from the industry. Or may it be women-exclusive social events, where they are able to share their experiences with each other in an environment where they are the minority. However, diversity is much more than this, and today I challenge you all to actively think about this. At this stage, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Jamie Alders, and I this year have the honor of being president of the VSV Leonardo da Vinci. Our vision is simple: enriching the student life of all aerospace students. And as aerospace is inherently an international study, it's inevitable that different cultures are going to mix. With this, I'd like to proceed about a personal story about myself. Growing up, I've long been exposed to different cultures. May this be through the fact that my parents both raised me with their own culture, one European, one Asian, and through the fact that I spent a large part of my childhood traveling to different countries. I've long been exposed to these different cultures and different ways of doing, and learned from them. And these experiences, the diversity in these experiences, have shaped me to the person I am today. And through this, I've seen the words, the power of the aerospace industry in connecting people and bringing people together. And for me, every year, the world started to feel like a smaller place. For I learned it is not only about including one another, it's also about learning from each other and getting the most out of each other. This is why the team complementing each other resonates in my experience. Before proceeding to taking you through the program of the day, I'd like to take a moment to explicitly recognize the work done by the students behind the scenes, which we unfortunately can't see now. But as you may know, all the events in VSV organizes are organized by our active members, who besides the study, put time and effort in the development of other fellow students by organizing events like this. Today was made possible by our Aerospace Diversity Department, who, even with the regulations of the COVID-19 pandemic, persisted in the organization. And I am confident they have made today a success. So, Dorothea, Jelle, Marloes, Nadine, Sarah, Aida, Fenna, and Quinte, you guys did an amazing work. I'm proud to open this Aerospace Diversity Day on behalf of you guys. Thank you very much. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I'd now like to introduce to you our first speaker, who will be calling in from across the Atlantic Ocean, from the United States. This is Christine Darden. Some of you may know Christine Darden from the book where her story was figured, Hidden Figures, the American dream and the untold story of black women mathematicians who helped win a space race. Ms. Darden started her career in NASA in 1967, where she worked as a human computer. Tedious work she was overqualified for. However, her ambitions were much larger than this. And as an African American woman, she stepped up to her supervisor to say that she wanted to do more than only process the data, but also wanted to create the data. Later on, she became one of the first female aerospace engineer at NASA Langley. And after a 40-year career at NASA, she got promoted into the Senior Executive Service, which is the highest rank of the Federal Civil Service. A truly inspiring story I look forward to hear her share. The second speaker I'd like to introduce today is going to be present here in Delft today. His name is Michiel van Dorst, as Chief Executive Officer of Air Traffic Control in the Netherlands, or otherwise known as LVNL. Before joining LVNL, Mr. van Dorst worked at KLM, Royal Dutch Airlines, where he not only was captain of multiple aircraft types, but also took place in the executive committee representing company-wide operations. At LVNL, he has taken place in the executive committee and here led the company in creating a more diverse and inclusive community. An incredible story we can all learn a lot from, and it's a great pleasure to welcome you here today in Delft. After a short break, we'll proceed to the panel discussion of the day, which will be moderated by a fellow student of ours, namely Julien Rajes. Julien Rajes currently studies a Master of Aerospace Engineering with a track Control and Operations. During her studies, she has long dedicated herself in diversity. At the VSV, she has taken part in the Women with Wings Committee, Women's Department Amelia, and 2 years ago took part in the board of the society to help women find their place in the study of aerospace engineering. For this, she got awarded the Aviation Innovation, International Aviation Women's Association Scholarship in 2019. And today, she works as community manager at the Aerospace Innovation Hub at the faculty, where she firsthand is able to witness diversity as a driving factor for innovation. I will leave further introductions of the panelists to Ms. Rajes, but through this, I would like to also, on behalf of the VSV, welcome Oana van de Togt, Kai van der Made, Julien van Campen, Elly Domene, and Daenen today at the Aerospace Diversity Day. With nothing further to do, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to leave you with our first speaker, Christine Darden, and on behalf of the VSV Leonardo da Vinci, I'd like to thank you all for tuning in, and I hope you have an unforgettable day at this year's Aerospace Diversity Day. Thank you.
Hey, good afternoon. I hope you can hear me now. I'm so very happy to be here with you this afternoon and talk with you a little bit about my career. I was a very active child, loved to play outside on outdoor activities and help my dad with his car and work on my bicycle and things like that. I also started to school early. My mom was a teacher, and I actually went to the first grade with her when I was almost 4 years old. And so I went all the way through school right across the street from my house. I found out when I got in the 9th grade that I really liked playing that I really liked physical science when I did that class. And I guess when my first really advanced math class was when I took algebra in the 9th grade, and I did okay there. But after I finished the 10th grade, my parents decided to send me to a boarding school in North Carolina, an all-girl boarding school. And I was 13 by then. And I the class that I took in the boarding school, the only math class that they offered that I could take was plane geometry. And so I signed up for plane geometry when I was in boarding school. And I fell in love with plane geometry. I absolutely fell in love with it and did very well with the class. And in fact, decided that I wanted to major in mathematics when I did that. And so I kept thinking about majoring in mathematics and saying I would love to have a career like that. And so now when I went into the 12th grade at the boarding school, I had a job. All of us had jobs to do. Well, one of my jobs in the 12th grade was to bring in the newspaper every day and to put it in the library so everybody could read it. And on October the 5th, 1957, this was the headline of the paper that I saw. The Soviets fired Earth satellite into space. It's circling the globe at 18,000 miles an hour, and it has crossed over us 4 times in the last 24 hours. So Sputnik had been launched, and that was launched the first month or so of my senior year in high school. And of course, that just set the United States aflutter. Everybody was wondering how in the world did the Soviets beat the United States to space? The school systems were all kind of shaken and everything. And of course, the students were encouraged, well, you need to take more math and science. You need to take more STEM courses and everything. So there was just a big uproar, of course, going on because Sputnik went up. We ended up making our senior yearbook a space theme, and it was, just a lot of things going on. So I'm sure that might have impacted my life as I went off to college after my senior year in high school. I will also tell you that when I was in high school, I was pretty homesick when I was there, and kept asking my parents, could I go back home? Could I go back home? And at the end of the first semester of my first year there, I called my mother and I said, oh, well, we finished our first semester, Mom, but we're having a dance. Guess what? If you'll send me some money so I can buy a dress for the dance, I think that would be great. So Mother sent me a money to buy a dress, and I went to the dance, and I had a nice time there. But I will tell you that probably 6 months later, I was talking to my mother, and she said, you know what, Christine? I had decided I was going to let you come home at the end of the first semester. But when you called, you did not mention home. All you wanted was a new dress. And so I sent you the new dress, and I have not heard one other word about coming home. So I stayed there, and I graduated at the top of my class. And I'm sure that I grew during that process, that my mother kept me at that school, and I had to learn to live with all of the girls that I didn't know before and live in a different area and everything. And so I think that helped me grow up quite a bit. But I had decided I wanted to major in mathematics. And so when I drove to Virginia to major in mathematics at a college here in Virginia. And when I got here, I began to realize that the only math classes that I had had were algebra and plane geometry. And the other students coming from all the big cities around here had had calculus and trigonometry and all of those classes. And I says, well, gosh, I'd have to start at the bottom and move forward. But my dad called me. You can go back to the second slide. My dad called me and said, Christine, I think that you ought to get a teacher certificate. He says, I think you would be more apt to find a job when you finish college if you've got a teacher's degree and can teach school. And so I thought about what my dad said. But then I said, well, you know what? I have decided my dream career is going to be in mathematics. And I really want to do that. And I actually added some other steps to that. I know what my career I want it to be. Perceive of myself as this mathematician, P1, P2, then sit down and plan what it is I need to do to get to be a mathematician. And then P3, prepare, work that plan. What do I need to prepare myself in to get what I need to be a mathematician. And then the P4 is persist. Don't let a detour stop you. Don't let a hole in the road stop you. Whatever problem you run into, solve that problem and keep going. And that was something that I had gotten in my mind someplace in high school that actually served me well for the rest of my career. So I decided I was going to go into teacher education. I signed up for teacher education. And so after I did that, I said, I will earn over 4 years of getting my teacher's degree. I'm going to earn a lot of electives. So I decided I was going to use all of my electives to take extra courses in higher level mathematics that I did not have to graduate. And that's what I did. So I graduated 4 years later with my teacher's certificate and about 20 hours of extra higher level mathematics that I didn't have to have. And I went off to another city in Virginia to teach school. As soon as I got there, one of the teachers at the school came up and said, well, we go up to Virginia State University to take classes that they teach free to people who teach in Virginia. Would you like to go? And I said, well, sure, I'd like to go. I went with them and signed up for another higher level math class, stayed in it the whole year of going up every Saturday, and everything worked well. And a couple of years later, I was actually at another school teaching, and I am the one that suggested to the teachers that we go to Virginia State and take these math classes. I got one carload of people to go with me. We went up, we signed up for the math class. Well, I signed up for math classes. Some of them were signing up for other classes. And after the first semester, which I thought had gone very well, everybody that was in that car with me decided they weren't going the second semester. I said, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? This was on a Friday night, and the class was an 80-mile drive after work. And I said, well, I really don't want to be driving home by myself like that late at night, but I don't want to quit. And so I'm going to have to keep going. So I continued on with driving up after work on Friday, getting there after about a couple of hours, staying in class for about 3 hours, and about 10:30 or 11 o'clock at night, I was driving home, and often with my head out the window so I wouldn't fall asleep. But I was glad I kept doing that, even if I was by myself, because I had gotten married by then, and my husband got a fellowship to go to that college to work on a master's in biology. And I said, oh my gosh, it looks like we might be moving to that area, and I might need a job. So the next week or two, when I went back to my class on Friday night, I went up to my teacher and I said, you know, it looks like we're going to be moving to this area, and I'm wondering if you know of any classes that I might look at, any jobs I might look into around here that I might get so I can have some support while I'm here. He said, oh, you're going to be moving here. This was the head of the math department. He says, you're going to be moving here. I said, yes. He said, let me take you across the hall and introduce you to the head of the physics department. He is looking for a research assistant in aerosol physics. And we went across the hall and we met Dr. Hodgkinson, head of the physics department. He wanted me to do research, or he was looking for somebody to do research in light scattering of non-spherical particles. And sounded great to me. So I would get paid for doing that. But then I found out I would also get paid for going to get a master's degree. I had decided by then that it was really applied math that I really, really liked. And so I signed up to get a master's degree in applied math. So 2 years later, I graduated with a degree in applied math. And I went by the placement office at the school and said, do you know of any jobs I might check into around here? She said, where have you been? I said, what do you mean? Where have I been here? She says, didn't you know NASA was here yesterday recruiting? I said, no, I had no idea that that was happening. She said, they were here. Fill out this application. I'm going to mail it in. I filled out the application. She mailed it in. 3 weeks later, I had an offer from NASA to go there and work as a computer. And that was just after the Apollo program started with NASA. So the computers were women who were hired. Most of them had been trained as math teachers, but they were hired to support the engineers with all the data that they had to reduce at this new NACA center that NASA had built, or that the United States had built in Hampton, Virginia. And so I worked there. There were lots of wind tunnels that they had built around the building that I was assigned to. And there were a number of other women in the office that I was working in. It was my first experience of working with white people. I had always been in segregated environments all my life. But I had learned how to program in graduate school. And so I knew how to program. The engineers would bring in equations to be solved. They might, some of these equations were to how to calculate the flow in some of the wind tunnels there. One of the things this group had to do that I was working in, it was the reentry physics branch. They had to calculate how the Apollo capsule, how fast it could come back into the atmosphere without getting too hot and burning up. They had to give a number for that. They also had to calculate the angle at which the capsule came into the atmosphere so it would not bounce on the atmosphere and go back out into space. And so I worked on some of those equations, how the flow in the wind tunnels went, because they used these wind tunnels to come up with these estimates of these answers that they needed. And so I worked as a computer for about 5 years. And there was one time they offered an introductory engineering class that I could take. I took that class and absolutely loved it, absolutely loved it. And then I started to think, well, I wonder why, you know, all of the men being hired are put in engineering sections, and I was put in, all the women I actually put in computer sections, mathematics sections. And the young lady I was talking to said, well, because I said, well, maybe it's because the men all have engineering degrees. She said, no, they don't all have engineering degrees. There are some men over there in that engineering section that have mathematics degrees. I said, oh, is that right? Well, if that's the case, you know, that's really what I want to do. I'm going to ask about, could I be transferred into the engineering section? And I asked my immediate supervisor about being transferred, and he said, no, I don't think that's possible. I don't think you can transfer. So I didn't particularly like the answer, but I waited. I sat at my desk for a couple of weeks thinking, you know, should I apply for another job if I don't want to stay here, or what should I do? So I finally said, well, I'm going to go to a higher level supervisor. Now that was taking a risk, because I knew that going over my supervisor's head and asking somebody else could make me get fired. But I said, but I'm going to talk to this higher level supervisor. And so I went to my supervisor, a director, and I said, I would like to ask you a few questions, if I might. I said, I'd like to know why a male and a female coming here with the same degree are assigned to such different jobs. The men are all put in engineering sections where they do research, they give talks, they write papers, they publish papers, and because they publish papers, they get promoted. And I said, but the women are put in the computer section and they work for the engineers. So they will bring them equations to solve. And they don't do any research. They don't give talks. They don't write papers. And if they have done some of the work that are put in papers, they generally have trouble getting their names as an author of the paper. So the women have trouble doing that. And as a result, the women didn't generally get promoted very easily. And that was a real problem. And when I finished asking my question to the director, he says, you know, nobody has ever asked me that question before. And I said, well, you know, I'm asking it now. And I left and I went back to my office. And 2 weeks later, I got word that I had been promoted from a computer or data analyst was my title, to an aerospace engineer. And I had been transferred to an engineering section, which was great news for me. And one of the first things I thought about doing when I did that was I wanted to get a degree in engineering. So at the same time I got this transfer to engineering, I signed up to get a doctorate in engineering at the NASA Langley, which was had a school there from George Washington University. And so this was great news for me. My first assignment, the thing that was going on in that country was we had gone faster than the speed of sounds with airplanes in 1947. There had been some people thinking about building a supersonic commercial airplane. The English and the French were getting ready to build the Concorde. The Russians were getting ready to build the Tu-144, and the Americans were getting ready to build a supersonic airplane. But when the Americans did a lot of testing with supersonic military airplanes, they found out how loud the sonic boom was and how many complaints they got from the people in Oklahoma City about the sonic booms damaging their houses, breaking some of their windows and things like that. And they spent a lot of money repairing a lot of houses, correcting the damage that the sonic boom had done. And so my first assignment in the engineering section was my new boss brought me a technical paper from a couple of professors at Cornell University about some of their ideas about how we might be able to soften the sonic boom. Can we go to slide 4, please? Okay, go back to the previous one. Okay, this is the sonic boom pressure field. This is an airplane that's going faster than the speed of sound. And nobody even really knew how the sonic boom was generated when they first started studying this. But this airplane is, of course, pushing all the molecules of air out of the way. Different portions of this airplane are generating shock waves off of the tail, off of the wings, the engines, and things like that. And so all of the damage, disturbances generated by this airplane travel at the speed of sound. And the speed of sound here where I am is like 740 miles an hour. This airplane is probably going about twice that fast. And so, so the airplane is going twice that fast. So all of the disturbances travel at the speed of sound going toward the outer bounds of this cone that's on the nose of the airplane. And this cone goes all the way to the ground. This airplane could be at 45,000 feet in the atmosphere, but that edge of that cone goes all the way to the ground. And so when that airplane is flying across the United States, that cone reaches the ground. The pressures outside of that cone are much lower than the pressures inside. We have high pressures, especially along the edges of the cone. And so when that cone intersects the ground, the dark green area that you see, we get a loud jump in pressure. It's instantaneously pops on your ears. And that is the sonic boom. And when I'm generally talking to students, I even say with a balloon, illustrate it with a balloon. If we all in the same auditorium and I blow up a balloon, we've all got the same pressure on our ear, a lower pressure. If I blow up the balloon, the atmospheric pressure in the balloon is higher. If I pop that balloon, this shock wave from the balloon goes out in all directions at the speed of sound. And when it hits your ear, the air pressure on your ear instantaneously jumps from what it was out in the auditorium to what it was in the balloon. And you get another pop. So that is like the sonic boom. This instantaneous jump in pressure on your ear is the pop that you hear with the balloon pop and the sonic boom crash. Okay, and so next slide, please. And so what some of the people had done, in fact, one guy who had done a lot of this work came from England and had talked about how to maybe predict how loud a sonic boom could be based on the shape of the airplane. And so we got an airplane here at the top of the slide, and we put a Mach curve through that depending on how fast that airplane is flying. And we calculate the area that is intersected at that wave. And once you get that area, you plot that area at that distance along the axis of the airplane. And you do that from the front of the airplane where it's 0 to the tail of the airplane where the area is 0. And this is the equivalent area distribution of this airplane. And this Englishman came up with something called an F function, which is described here, which is the area distribution of this airplane could actually be converted into the F function with an integral equation. And this has to do with the disturbances generated by that airplane. That's what this F function describes. And if that airplane keeps flying, the highest point of the F function advances, as we see in the next slide, and the lowest point recedes. Okay, and then we get they actually put it there and we get a sonic boom. Now, here we see some of the ideas that occurred. They thought that we started thinking that when you get a lot of shocks off military airplanes and everything, they all intersect with each other and your sonic boom gets louder and louder. And so we started thinking of maybe if we could design an airplane such the shocks don't intersect with each other, but we design the airplane such that the shocks sort of come straight down and you get sort of the same level of shock, you'll get a much softer sonic boom. And that is one of the ideas that was used to try to start designing for a low sonic boom airplane. So I took all of the equations in that report and wrote a computer program that would take you putting in how long the airplane was, how heavy the airplane was, what altitude you were flying, and how fast you were going. With that input, the output of that computer program would be the equivalent area distribution you needed to come up with an airplane design. All right, so next slide. All right, and so you would get your F function, you would get your equivalent area distribution out of the code, and then you would design the fuselage of the airplane, the wing of the airplane, the lift of the airplane, and that would be the airplane that you wanted to build to generate a sonic boom. Next slide, please. Okay, so as I said, I finished writing the computer program. I actually came out with this area distribution at the bottom, and we can see that it is a lot smoother than the area distribution of your typical fighter aircraft. And once we came out with this, one of the other engineers that I was now working with and I started to design airplanes. Next slide, please. Here is a Mach 2 design that I designed and had built. And I started designing to match. We actually had some codes in the branch that would calculate the area of each portion of that airplane and also calculate the lift that the wings on this airplane would generate. And so the next slide shows a second airplane that was designed, which has a cambered wing, which is a little more complex than the other airplane. But once these are built out of stainless steel, they had to be exact. They cost about $6,000 or $7,000 a piece because of the exactness that they had to have. Okay, next slide. Now this is the wind tunnel that we tested in. This is our 4 by 4 foot supersonic tunnel at Langley. This is the airplane mounted on its side. And this is a pressure probe on what we are calling the ground, but it's actually on the side of the wind tunnel, but it would be the ground of an airplane flying that way. There is a second pressure probe in the air. This yellow component here would move the entire airplane forward. And the wind tunnel itself has a huge compressor on the end of it, and it is compressing and blowing the air forward, meeting this airplane at Mach 2. At about 1,600 miles an hour or more. So that is where the speed comes from in the wind tunnel. Well, of course, that cone now is generated on this airplane. And that cone overlaps this pressure probe. So we get the pressure inside the cone with this pressure probe, and we get the pressure in the tunnel with this pressure probe. And knowing those two pressure probes gives you an idea of how loud that sonic boom is going to be. Well, we found out with the airplanes that we had designed, we were actually getting a softer pressure than we built one like a military airplane that gave you a big loud end wave that we often hear. And so we said, you know, this looks like it actually has some promise. And so after we had done this for a lot of years, we actually had brought in some of the airplane makers in this country to work with us and talk about the concept and everything. And we decided, you know, we think this is going to work. We had tested a lot of other different kinds of airplanes, but we said we really need to do a flight test with this. We need to make sure that this works from 45 or 50,000 feet in the atmosphere. Next slide. So a few years later, and this was around 2002, we were working with another agency of the government and decided that we wanted to do a flight test. So we borrowed 2 Air Force military airplanes. Here is one of the F-5s, and this is the second F-5 with the camouflage. They've actually put padding panels on that airplane to make the equivalent area distribution the same as the area distribution we were looking for out of the program. And then they're flying the airplanes over the desert here in the United States at the design speed and measuring the sonic booms that come out of that airplane. When the sonic booms of these 2 airplanes went into the control room, the people in the control room started shouting because they got a loud end wave from the camouflage plane and they got a much softer end wave from this airplane. All right, and so once we saw that this really looks like it's going to work, NASA decided we should have some of the airplane companies in this country come up with some of their own designs to see what kind of airplane designs they would want. And so the next slide shows one of the designs that one of the airplane companies in this country built to be a quiet airplane, quiet supersonic airplane. And this one was built by Lockheed Martin. And after Lockheed Martin had built some of these, NASA had a competition and actually gave a grant to one of the airplane companies. And in this case, it was Lockheed Martin to build a low boom X plane. So right now, Lockheed Martin is actually building a low boom X plane based on this technology that we worked on at NASA for some years. And it was at, I think it's about, let me see if is there another slide? Yeah, $247 million contract they got to build this airplane. And they are supposed to finish building the airplane in 2021. So here within the next few months. And once they do that, they're going to fly the airplane over the United States, making sure that it flies great as a supersonic airplane, but then also to make sure that this airplane is a low boom. And after they make sure it flies well, they're going to fly it over the people, and they're going to get feedback on whether they could stand the noise that's coming on this. They said it sounds just like a thump. They're actually then will be working with the people in this country, FAA, and the people in Europe about whether that level of noise could be acceptable and we could fly supersonically across the United States in a commercial airplane and in that. So in working on this in my career, and I think that's the last slide, I actually worked with all men. I was actually the supervisor of all men because I was the head of the low sonic boom program, especially the design and operation component of that program. And whereas there were, I think I was used to working with men. Going to school with them was, I ran into a problem, but I found out that I actually was used to competing against men, and I did my work. And I think all of the work that I did in mathematics and my saying I'm not going to quit all helped me move forward and actually do my work well and speak up. I was afraid to speak to the director, but instead of me getting fired, it changed my life and gave me the best job I'd ever had in my life. And so those were some of the values of keep on keeping on, keep on doing, and keeping on working. And of course, when we work with others that have not been raised like we have, we all have different perspectives on things. We all have different ideas, and we actually feed on each other's ideas, and we come up with better ideas because we're doing that. And I have often found that true in study groups. I don't want anybody coming to a study group not having studied, but everybody comes with their own ideas about how things work. And that entire study group actually comes out on top because everybody is more innovative because they have discussed the different thoughts about how to solve a problem or something like that. And everybody is the better for it. And so this is why there is so much noise now about having diversity in everything and taking advantage of the ideas and the innovations and the smartness of everybody. And we will all be the better off for it rather than trying to hide the diversity and everything. Is you ready to ask questions?
Yes, thank you very much for your talk. The first thing I want to say is that there are a lot of questions, so I'm not sure I can handle everything, but we'll see. First thing is not a question, but wanted to tell you this. So much respect for you, a true inspiration for women with a dark skin color like me. And a lot of the messages were actually how inspirational you are. So thank you for having this talk.
Thank you very much. I had a great career, and I gave talks in England and Greece and Japan and everything, where I had met people at conferences. So it really worked out well.
Yeah. A second thing is during my studies, sometimes I feel like it's just impossible to get where I want to be. This kind of discourages me sometimes. So have you ever felt like this? And if so, how do you deal with it?
One of the things I used to do is go to the library and find different textbooks that discuss the same kinds of problems sometimes. And you find that different authors explain problems different ways. And when I would kind of go through several books in the library, and I would like the quietness in the libraries too. Sometimes one way an author would explain something actually would resonate with me and give me an idea of actually how to solve a problem over another way. And so I think that really helped me a lot. And the same thing sometimes in talking to people, you would get different ideas about how to do that. Your study groups and everything, as I was saying, sometimes that person can say something that makes your light go on in your eyes, and you really understand how that would help you work the problem. That didn't always work, but it helped me a lot. And I spent an awful lot of time in the library going through different books and textbooks and things and looking at solved problems to see if I could get some hint about how this problem is solved, kind of thing. So it took a lot of work, and I did it. I just had to keep doing it.
Yeah. Another question, how did your fellow engineers treat you when you were promoted?
Actually, I was, as I said, I became the head of the group that, the head of the design and engineering group. So sometimes I would see my office mate get a little upset sometime, but it didn't hurt me in anything. And in fact, I actually, sometimes they tell managers you ought to promote everybody in a branch meeting so everybody knows it. I'm not sure that works is best all the time. Sometimes you don't want people to know you've been promoted if they're gonna get upset about it. But I didn't really end up having trouble with this. We actually co-authored a number of papers together and everything. So I tried to learn to work with all of them, and and make things work.
Yeah. And another question about that promotion. How did you build up the courage to talk to your supervisors about a promotion when nobody else had done it before?
I think that P to the fourth formula says you don't quit. And so I wasn't coming there to learn how to work for the engineer. I was coming there to learn how to do some of my own, research and everything. And so it, like I said, it took courage to do it. But I had said in my mind, you know what, if I get fired, I will go get a job teaching in college. Because I had offers for college jobs when I went to NASA. And so that gave me the courage to keep going. And I said, it won't be the end of the world if I get fired.
Yes, and someone else is also wondering how your direct supervisor reacted when you got promoted. So you were the one above?
Well, you know what? I don't remember hearing anything from him after that. I was leaving, and so I guess he no longer had anything else to do with me.
Yes, I think we have time for another question. Thank you for your immensely inspirational talk. You've had a truly incredible career and received many awards. What achievement are you most proud of?
Well, I think the thoughts of being able to go into that job and actually succeed in that job and do well and actually make a contribution in that area. So I worked really hard in doing it. I spent a lot of weekends, sometimes out at work at my desk working on things. But I thought that was all worth it because I enjoyed what I was doing so much and everything. So like I said, I actually think this drove me to do things and to speak up for myself. There some of these things say you need to learn how to speak up and say what you want. And the Hidden Figures movie, if any of you ever saw that, it actually shows all of the ladies there telling what they want to do. I want to do such and such. I don't want to just always support you. I want my name on that paper, or I want to be the supervisor. And sometimes it helps for people to know that that's what you're working for. So even though it took a lot of push for me to do it, I think it actually helped me to say, what I wanted to do.
Yes. One final question. Who were your role models growing up?
Well, I think that geometry teacher started out as my role model, and I actually stayed in touch with her until about 5 years ago when she passed. She actually invited me. She became a principal of a school back in North Carolina while I was working at NASA, and she invited me down there to speak to the students at her school about, getting to NASA and what I was doing at NASA and everything. So that was good. And I will tell you that I've actually had a number of my bosses tell me they thought that I reach my audiences better when I'm speaking because I was a teacher and I would speak to the students trying to get them to understand what I was talking about. And so maybe that was a factor also. I'm not sure, but she impressed me, and I did teach that class one day when we had a swap class, and I taught the geometry class while I was in it because I enjoyed it so much.
Okay, I think we're rounding off now. Do you have any final words you want to say to the students?
Well, I would say, and the reason I have up here, determine your dream career at the top, is because if you really love something that you're doing, you are really able to work hard at it and not quit. But if it's something you don't like, you're not going to do that. So it's important for you to, if you can find something that you really, really love and you really want to do, because you will work hard to succeed at that. And I think that's one of the reasons that is there, because if you don't like it, you will more easily quit. And we don't want anybody to quit.
No, indeed. Well, thank you very much for your talk. It was really interesting and inspirational. And looking at the questions, I think the students really enjoyed it.
Well, I'm glad they did, and I thank you all for having me there, and I hope there was something in my message that will mean something to you.
Yes. The next speaker we have lined up is Michiel van Dorst, the CEO of LVNL.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Michiel van Dorst. I'm CEO of LVNL, Air Traffic Control the Netherlands, and I'm very proud to be able to talk to you today on this rather peculiar way via video screening. First of all, of course, I want to thank Mrs. Christine Darden from NASA for being able to talk to you, the students. Very interesting speech indeed. So, diversity and inclusion for the Aerospace Diversity Day. I'm really proud to be on this podium today. And at the same time, I was also thinking, why me? Because if you look at the screen behind me, you can see I'm the stereotype CEO, right, in the Netherlands. I'm 50 years old. I'm a guy. I've got a wife that works part-time. And, you know, I'm trying to balance in my life with my family life and my business life, but it's not easy. So, but I've always been interested in the subject. During my period at KLM, my previous employer, I was very active in coaching female management trainees to become the best of themselves. However, at the same time, I must admit that it always amazed me that in the company at that time, and they have improved tremendously over the years, of the top 100 people in the company, about 6% only was women. And I think that could be improved, and it should have been improved. This may seem an odd picture to you, but this is Hamburg, 1988 in Germany. And the Dutch national team had just won the match against Germany. It was a semi-final. Later on, they moved to the final to become European champion at that time. The question is, what do people remember? The 17 million people that were inhabitants of the Netherlands, they remember this. Cheering faces, very happy people. And we won. However, if you look at the next picture, 80 million Germans remembered something completely different. Of course, they were not cheering faces. People were unhappy because they lost a game, a home game. And the second thing they remember is the lowest picture. And I don't know whether any one of you knows this person wiping his bottom with a jersey of the German national shirt. It is a present-day coach of FC Barcelona football club, and he was the previous coach of the Dutch national team. So that means even after such a mistake, you can still make a career. It can happen. But what people did remember is not only the lost, people in Germany remembered also the insult of the German jersey and the bottom of Ronald Koeman. So what can we learn from those two pictures? I think it really shows that people from one country to another, or just different people, can experience the same event very differently. And I think that's what it shows. Now, let's turn this picture into business. It's funny, the strongest economic ties in the Netherlands, business-wise, are the ties with the Germans. Of course, that is our neighboring country. Now, if you realize that Germany is your biggest trade partners, and you do realize that people experience things differently, then you're going to think, okay, so if I experience things differently than the Germans, how do I serve that market well? Because that's an important question if you turn to business. How do I serve that market well? Because if you don't understand your market perfectly, you're going to miss out on a huge amount of opportunities. And that, of course, is not what you want, what you want to happen. And especially for you guys, living in the aerospace world, there is a huge potential market to serve, and that's a market of potentially 7 billion customers. You don't want to miss out on that one. So if you think that in the Netherlands, with 17 million people, 99% of the people are foreigners. They live abroad. They don't live in your country. Then you understand that you have to work on your diversity. You have to work on the way you serve and you understand your potential markets as well. Then let's look at China. 1.4 billion people live in China. 1.4 billion Chinese. That's a huge amount of people. But still the same goes for them. If they want to serve a world market well, they have to understand it as well. And even if you share a country with 1.4 billion people, you have to realize that still 80% of the people are foreigners. They live in a different country. So diversity in that sense is important to everybody. Now, let's take a small side step at my personal career. I became the Executive Vice President of Flight Operations in KLM when I was 37. And that means, of course, that before that I had to put a lot of effort in, a lot of energy in my personal career. I started my career, however, as a professional pilot. Did my flight school in Maastricht-Aken Airport, moved on to KLM, and I flew DC-10, 737, 747-400, and in the end I was a captain on a 777. And next to that, I had a position in the executive committee in the last few years as accountable manager of the and deputy COO of the whole company. So you need to put in a lot of effort, and you get to see a lot of the world. Anyway, back to LVNL. You can see a picture of 2016, and you can see a picture of 2020. 2016 was the year that I landed at LVNL, and 2020, of course, is quite a recent picture. And I don't know if you can see the difference between the two, but for me, the 2016 picture, is a picture of uneasiness. It was a non-diverse team, and you can see it even in the way we stand. It's very strict. It's like almost military. And look at the guy on the right hand side of our female CFO. I mean, he's just looking like he can jump you any moment, like a predator, right? All guys with an engineering background or with an air traffic controller background, and some combined ATCO and the engineering background. Except, to be honest, for me, because I have a master in economics, and of course the engineers in the company said that's not a master, that's just a little bit of education. Anyway, what I said when I came there, I noticed there was something in the company. If you look at all the persons individually, fantastic people, great people who moved on. Some of them moved on to a different career, to a different company, and they're doing excellent work at the moment also. But I felt that in the company at the moment, we did not have the diversity, we did not have the inclusion that we really needed to make this company, in touch with society, because as LVNL, Air Traffic Control the Netherlands, of course, we try to serve society, the Netherlands, our customers and our partners. And you could also see it. There was an idea that LVNL was a closed building, a closed company, and customers did not feel heard. Society did not feel heard. They were not heard in their needs. If I look at our project portfolio, over 160 projects, and there was not a single one that was within the money and within the time. So I said, I need to change it. I need to change this very one-sided engineering air traffic control perspective. So that's when we moved. The first person I hired, I'm very glad, Marlou Banning, our CFO, Chief Financial Officer, and I hired her after a few months in the company. And then we said, okay, we're going to change this company to a company that's really trying to create value for the people in the Netherlands, and value could mean, and for our customers, of course, and value would mean less emission, less noise, or predictability in a noise sense, and for the customer, of course, a better accessibility of Schiphol Airport and more predictable operations. And so we set out on a journey to change the people. And if you look at the background of the people in 2020, They come from all kind of different backgrounds. Of course, it's because all the people, because what you saw happening below the top, we had at the top level, we had a very one-sided engineering perspective. And of course, that's also what you see happening in the teams below those people, a very one-sided engineering perspective. An engineering perspective is very important, but there is more to it if you want to lead the company. I think the 2020 picture shows a big difference. I'm smiling more and I'm not so tense. You see all the people not so tense. There's a few familiar faces, only two. No, Marloet, so only three at this picture. And we have moved to diversity, first step with the women, to 40% of the team. Of course, José Daenen, our Director of Operations, who's in the wheelchair, he will be in the next panel as well. Another important or interesting thing, by the way, is that in this picture, 5 people are married to a husband. So let us have a short look on what the people at LVNL think that diversity can bring.
We are all the same in principle. We just have to communicate in a certain way or give time for the others.
Want iedereen heeft ervaringen van hun leven.
En als je kijkt naar teamwork, dan is een van de belangrijkste fundamenten is dat je vertrouwen in elkaar hebt. En dat je elkaar ook als mens beter leert kennen.
It's more like the reasoning behind it gets you thinking, you know, maybe that's a better way of doing it. Oh wow, that's a smart idea. And that just makes you a better person as an individual.
I've become a better person as an individual. However, in the team now, if you have different people from diverse backgrounds with diverse cultural strength, the overall team output will be way more positive and better than it was if it was consisting of just people from one culture, so to say.
Met andere culturen hebben wij verschillende zwakken en sterke punten. En dus kunnen wij echt makkelijk combineren deze zwakke en sterke punten om een topdienst te verlenen.
Well, I think personally I couldn't have said it any better. And there's a nice picture with all the flags on the screen at the moment. We really put a lot of effort in the last few years to get people from abroad, but also people that live in the Netherlands with different backgrounds to get them interested in LVNL. Of course, we are not a very well-known company. We are a business-to-business company. We are not a business-to-customer company. Business-to-consumer company. Because I don't think that a lot of people go on holiday say, well, let's hope today that the service of LVNL is perfect. No, they just go there and they expect to fly on time. And that's what we have to work on. But we do have to understand what is happening in society. We do have to understand our stakeholders. But because the amount of stakeholders for LVNL is enormous. It is the Royal Netherlands Air Force. It's also the Department of Defense. It is the Army, because they have also little drones. It is the Navy, because when they start shooting from their ships, they will do it via the airspace. We have to work together with energy companies when they're building their huge windmills. We have to listen to the people, to the aldermen, to the mayors of the surrounding communities near airports to see where the noise is coming down and what we could do for them to improve their experience with the air traffic overhead their villages. And of course, we have to work with several customers, low-cost customers, network-related customers. And to understand them all, you really have to have a diversity of people that have a sense of belonging in many different backgrounds in the world, I would say. These are just some of the pictures, some of the flags of people that work here. And we, of course, try to be very active also to recruit people especially people that live in the Netherlands but have a double background, for instance, to recruit people and to make them interested in the type of company that we are. Because if you have more diversity in backgrounds, I'm very sure, if you have more diversity in backgrounds, you will understand different trends in society earlier than if you would not have that. So what do you do to get to that point? Of course, you have to be very active. As I said, we started on diversity, and that's especially the balance between women and men in the company. And that means that whenever we went to the Technical University of Delft to tell a story, or to the Hogeschool of Amsterdam, University of Applied Sciences, we would specifically target the women in the audience, or the people from with a background, for instance, in Netherlands-Moroccan background, or a Netherlands-Turkish background. There's a lot of people from that, or Netherlands-Antilles background. There's a lot of people from that, of course, in the Netherlands. And we try to target them and make them interested in a company and get them to know our company. And then invite them over, have drinks with them, have a halal dinner with people, have diversity lunches, try to be very active, and also try to be active on the internet. And the moment we got people on board, we also ask them every now and then, will you help us create this diverse basis for LVNL? Because of course, people with a background with a Turkish background, they have a broader foundation in these groups. And of course, if you have a few 100,000 people with different backgrounds in the Netherlands, not 100 generations of Netherlands background, of course, it helps to identify these people, and it's a huge well, it's a huge talent source. And we do not want to miss out on that talent source. And of course, we have to work on gender balance as well. As I mentioned before, we have an internal part of the company, we call it Women on Track. That's an internal women network, and they can be active on women, you know, helping them out. How does this company work? How do we do that? Because it's, of course, in the beginning, it's quite scary. If you come to a company that is probably, if you don't count the air traffic controls, because there it's 30% women. But if you really look at the hardcore engineering departments, I think 95% of the people there is still male. So, of course, I'm very proud of those figures. As you can see, the first thing I did after a few months was select a female CFO, and that we have 2 board members in LVNL, so that brings us immediately up to 50%. I'm very proud of that, but it was only a small accomplishment. But I think the yellow line is even more important. Getting from 0 women in my management team to 40% at the moment, and that's really something to be proud of. And then, if you look at the regular management line, it stayed almost the same, which means that, you know, we did not take people from that management line up to my management team, my personal management team. No, we managed to get people from outside the company into the company, keep our I would say mid-management levels at the same level, and increase the level at the top tremendously. And also at our supervisory board, we are very happy to be at 40% of our female leadership there as well. So then, of course, you can talk about diversity, you can talk about inclusion and how important it is, but of course, at the end of the day, it all falls or stands with the accomplishments you do. Now, this is an interesting picture. At LVNL, about a year ago, we finished a total renovation of the air traffic control tower. Now imagine this. At that moment, we were almost at 500,000 aircraft movements at Schiphol Airport, one of the biggest airports in Europe. We totally renovated and rebuilt the inside of the air traffic control tower, and we did it for 1.5 years. For about 300 nights, all the air traffic controllers had to get out of the tower, engineers floating in, working tremendously from 11 in the evening till 6 in the morning. And then at 6 in the morning, everything had to be cleaned again so that the air traffic controller could do his job again and serve those 500,000 movements well. And 500,000 movement, I think, is best translated to what happens on a daytime, is that you have a peak hour capacity, and that is the highest peak hour capacity in Europe. We have a peak hour capacity of 110 aircraft per hour. And then if you see what's happening, that every day that the air traffic controllers coming back after a night shift from the emergency tower, coming back to the main tower and see that all their lines of visibility have changed. Of course, it's like a military operation to make sure that the people are trained, that people don't panic, that change management, from a change management perspective, that is very interesting. Because if position change, of course, you also have to change your procedure, you have to change your training, the perspective of the people is changed. And I think this could only be done by listening to all the inputs, and that's one of the skills I think we have learned by adding diversity and inclusion. A military operation, and except for the period when we introduced electronic flight strips, because incredibly, but yes, I think that's one of the things we noticed when I started in 2016. We did not have electronic flight strip at that time. We were still working with paper flight strip, people scribbling on it, passing it on to the next colleague. Of course, that's really old-fashioned. And now we're down to also electronic flight strips. And during this 1.5 years of reconstruction, we had not a single minute of air traffic delay caused by our operation. I think that is really an excellent part. Of course, there was also a few weeks that we had to introduce, and that's a system introduction of the electronic flight strips, and that did cause some temporary delays. Two other accomplishments. The one on the left side is our new air traffic control building. We have bought a Spanish system together with the Germans, Poland, and Lithuania. A new air traffic control system, which is due. We're due to start with it in 2 years from now, just over 2 years from now. So we had to build a total new building, and it was opened a few months ago. Why did we need a new building for that? The present air traffic control room was, well, technically it was so difficult to renovate from the inside while working on that. We said, okay, we need a new building for the new system. And it was also delivered on time. And then next to that, I think there is an excellent example of how LVNL at the moment listens to society and what we can accomplish. The blue line was the RNAV line, night approaches towards Schiphol Airport to the preferential runway during nighttime, that is runway 18 right. And then listening to the people in the surrounding communities, we managed to make an approach which actually weaves in between the villages, so people would experience less noise, children could sleep more easily during the nighttime, because we weave the traffic not overhead the villages anymore, but in between the villages, noise is reduced. And I think it is a very successful introduction by listening to the people in the environment, listening to the communities in the surroundings of Schiphol, by improving our value proposition, I would say, to the Netherlands. Anyway, I could talk for hours, of course, but those are some of the accomplishments I'm really proud of. Then, of course, there's also a lot of criticism, not a lot of criticism, but there is every now and then there is criticism on the efforts we do on diversity and inclusion. Like it's a fashion statement, or it's just something that is now and it will move, or it's not good for business, or it's not good for your performance, or well, maybe it is like that. But what I would like to say here, despite of the fact that in the last few years, and listen to the word despite of the fact in the last few years we have really been very active on diversity and inclusion, employee satisfaction has grown, customer satisfaction has grown, and the pace of innovation at LVNL has improved, and the way we do our project has improved, and that's why we can easily move up the pace of innovation. So I'm very, very proud of that. I think this is really a great accomplishment of all the people working at LVNL, and for me personally, I am very sure that this is due to the fact that we have been very active on improving our diversity, improving our inclusion at LVNL. So I think this is my story, and I really enjoyed telling it at this stage to you, and I hope I can really make a small change in a very important effort for you and for everybody, I think, in the Netherlands and probably in the society we live in the industry you are trained in, also in the whole world. Now, let's have a look at what the women at LVNL would have to say about this.
Vrijheid op het werk voor mij is mogen doen waar je goed in bent.
Ruimte voor groei, ruimte voor succes, ruimte voor resultaat en daarmee een vrijbrief voor geluk.
Vrijheid is voor mij, met mijn ambities en skills, het beste uit mezelf kunnen halen.
Respectvol met elkaar samenwerken en openstaan voor elkaar standpunten.
Plezier.
Gelukkig zijn.
Eigen ontwikkeling.
Jezelf mogen zijn.
Ambitie.
Verschillende generaties.
Veilige werk- en leeromgeving.
Samenwerken.
Gelijke kansen.
Ertoe doen.
Ruimte voor groei.
Jezelf zijn.
Samenwerken.
Ontplooiing.
Verantwoordelijkheid nemen.
Verschillende culturen.
Ontwikkelmogelijkheden.
Shinen.
Very proud of the LVNL people, very proud of all the diverse backgrounds, the women, diversity and inclusion at LVNL. And thank you for listening to me. I'm open to any questions that you may have. So the question is, do you believe quota, either for women or people from a different cultural background, are a step towards a solution? For me, it's very clear. It is a step to the conclusion, to the solution. I think it's very important. We've given ourselves quota. We said, you know, we want to increase diversity to at least 35% within 4 years, starting in 2016. Because if you don't do it, there's always an excuse to choose somebody that looks exactly like you. And if you are being pushed towards a quotum, at least you know you're going to have to work hard to get the talented people. There's a competition in the market, but of course that's always like that. You have to work on, you know, getting to know the other people, the people that maybe are not in your small little circle of influence or in your circle that you live in. So you really have to step out of your circle and be very active, broadening your circle, talking to other people, and then, you know, get the best out of this market. And that's how I did it for me, for our company, putting 35% as a first step, and then take it from there. And it brought us a lot. So yes, I'm very much in favor of quota. The question is, how do you deal with men that feel disadvantaged due to this policy? It is a valid question. And I would just say, you know, we are with 7 billion people on the world, and you used to compete with 3.5 billion, and now you compete with 7. So maybe it was the other way around before. And of course, there's always a small disadvantage for the present generation that feels that, you know, they're being left out, or they don't have the chances the previous generation had. And that is probably true. You know, it's society, it changes, you know, incrementally, step by step, and that may be painful, but at the same time, I'm very sure that there is always room for a beautiful career for talented people. And that does not necessarily mean you have to be at a technical university in Delft. It can be anybody. I need a cashier at the supermarket also, right? So, and if that's where your talent is, that would be, and that's a perfect fit, just go for it. So don't be afraid, just trust your talents and go. Yeah, with diversification, have I seen changes in the business performance? Yes, I did, because we have more different questions now, different questions from different backgrounds, not only in engineering, a hardcore engineering or EdCo background, but also people from a commercial background. And they ask different questions. They ask questions, what does our customer need? And before that I said, well, we can do something from an engineering perspective. Do you think it's nice? And maybe you build a fantastic system but there's no market value in there. So why would you do it? So with these different backgrounds, not only women and men or culturally different backgrounds, but also from a different business background, I think a lot has changed. And I think one of the last pictures showed it. employee satisfaction, customer satisfaction, and pace of innovation have improved over the years. So the despite word is of course not a despite word, it's just to the critics, it's not true. Is there something else needed to make diversity work, is the question. Well, yeah, that's a good one. So the question is do you just choose people from a diverse background, women or different cultures, or do you need to work on that as well later on? And I think that is a very important one, because if you ask a man if he's ready for a promotion, he will always say, yes, I'm ready, fully ready. Doesn't show in his resume, but he's ready, right? If you ask a woman, she said, well, I'm not sure. However, I think they're just as ready as anybody. But the first question is, that's probably just what a woman does, and I've noticed it several times. If you are aware that the woman may ask that question first instead of I'm ready, so you don't scare away from that answer, you just start conversation, and then of course at the end of the conversation, yeah, sure, she will jump in. That's what I've noticed, and even a few weeks ago it happened. But then I realized, after reading several books about it, articles about it, okay, that is probably a first reaction. So you also have to start shifting your own mindset and your own way of conversation, and understanding that people from different backgrounds have a different way of saying the same thing actually. Can you repeat the question? Yeah. So how do I think that the issue of diversity can be increased? So thinking about diversity can be increased by the stereotype of white men. That's right. First of all, let's be very open about it. A white man is not a guilty man. So he's not guilty about anything. You know, it's a new generation. You guys are all young, and you can be part of the change. You can be part of a better and a brighter future. So keep the faith and keep the momentum and keep the spirit up, I would say. And it's just about looking at seminars like this that will help. And I think, you know, by talking about it, making an active discussion within friends or between you, and I see it happening in the young generation everywhere at the moment. That is just perfect. So I think the white man is just as knowledgeable or interested in this subject as many other people around the world, and let's just go for it all together. I would say, let's not stand out the white man. Let's go for it all together. I think it's very important. It's just an opinion, right? I mean, it can be many opinions. That's just my opinion. So no, I just hire people with qualities and a different background. So why would people with a different background be not suitable to fit the job or be not talented enough? It's just nonsense. You just have to look for a talented person with a different background. They are there. So, but that's a very standard question, I would say, on this subject. I don't want to be hired because I'm a woman. I want to be hired because I'm talented. Yeah, sure. I don't hire you just because you're a woman. I hire you because you are a talented woman. Of course, because I will not create a mayhem in my own company or in my own customer base by just hiring people that are not talented or not fit for a job just because they are black, yellow, red, white, green, woman, whatever. I don't mind. I just want to improve my quality, and I want to improve my understanding of my stakeholder positions. And that's what you do with diversity. You have to start somewhere. And so the question is, why do you think 40% of the women in your top team is not a fashion statement, while less women work in the aviation sector. It's probably also on some hardcore engineering issues, there is not as many women here at the Technical University, you know it, informatics for instance. And that's maybe very much related to this sector, but at the same time just look for people that have the talent to grow. Is it a fashion statement? Okay, maybe you can call it a fashion statement, but I believe it's a start of a new era. And I prefer to be part of that new era instead of saying, well, this is just a fashion statement of my side, because what do I have to gain with the fashion statement myself? I mean, my career has been quite okay so far, so I don't need it. I don't need it. I just want our company to improve. I want society to improve. I want the aviation sector to improve. Yeah. So the question is, what's the approach of LVNL towards LGBTQ people and people from a different race? I think when we showed the picture of 2020, maybe you can show it again, Anna Roos. I mentioned that of those people, 5 are married to a husband. And there's 4 women in the picture. So we are open on that. We try to be active on that, and we just show by having those people in our board that it is not an issue in itself. It is not an issue. We don't talk about their sexual background. It's okay. It's there. It's just a certain amount of talent that is needed for this job. At the same time, if you look at race, that's what I also showed in the video. I think people from different background, different races. I think race can be a goal in itself because it's also a different background. So looking at different culture, I prefer to mention different culture, but very often it comes down to race. And I think, you know, if you have people from a different background, from a different race, and they are included in your company, I think that's what our people from Zimbabwe or South Africa said. You know, the more diverse the background, the more knowledge you have about the world. And aviation in itself, of course, is a worldwide sector, so that helps. But we try to be very active also there, to recruit people from those bases, because there is a huge base in the Netherlands from different cultural backgrounds also that we want to tap into. So the question is, do I also aim to have people from more different cultural backgrounds in our board? Yeah, of course. It's just, you know, we have started like this. We have people not yet at the top level in the company. People, of course, have to follow certain career steps or build a certain career. But I'm sure in the future there will be people with different cultural backgrounds in our board as well. Absolutely. Absolutely. So how do I try to make my own kids do what they like and don't get too much influenced by stereotypes? I try to do it with my daughter. My sons are smaller, they are 4 and 6. My daughter is 17. I try to do it in the first 12 years because in the last 4 years I don't really think I don't feel I make a lot of difference anymore with her. But you know, I think if you do it in the first 10 years, the impact is biggest, and now she does whatever she likes, and I try to give her space to develop to the kind of person she wants to be. But it's actually, from now on, I think it's really more of her own task than of me guiding it. Most of the time it's just guiding with a bit of money and that's it, and off she goes. Do I, as a white man, understand the problems that people face? No. I have no clue what other people's problems are. Of course, I try to be interested, but even my wife says it. Once a week she says, you know, you don't understand what my feelings are. And she's probably right, because I live in my own body and live in my own mind. I try to be open. As a white man, I don't even know what my fellow white man, Jose Daenen, who's in a wheelchair, feels and experiences. I don't know. I can talk to him about it, but I don't know. So that's why I want to have people from different backgrounds surrounding me, that they can help me discover my own blind spot and put a spotlight on there. And so as a team, we have the personalities available, we have the backgrounds available, we have the insights available that make us really aware of this whole market, of this whole stakeholder experience, of this whole ecosystem around us. I think that is the power of diverse and inclusive teams. So the question is, do you have a concrete example where the diversity in my team improved our performance, right? I think most of the time it's about being open to other points of view. Sometimes you may say, if an older man of a village in the vicinity complains about certain issues, you may say, well, you know, I've had enough of complaints this week. I want to go home. And then you see that people with different backgrounds say, well, no, Michiel, you have to listen. One of the people in the present day board, he was the vice president of cabin crew management in KLM. I mean, that's 10,000 people, 8,000 women almost. That is a totally different background, and there's a very service-oriented background, customer-focused, customer-driven background that he brings to the team. And of course, he is one of those persons that could say, you know, we have to listen to this customer because it's important. We have to adapt to their needs, adapt to their wishes, and deliver value to them. Because in his previous job, that's what made money. So this is really a concrete example that diversity and background help. Right. Yeah. 24, does 24 look like, right? I don't have a crystal ball, but I think it would be nice if we would have also, let's say, start with one or maybe two, I don't know, people from a different cultural background. That would be fantastic if they would move up to their ranks. I'm trying to be active, coaching those people, guiding them a little bit whenever I can. Am I perfect? Not at all, not at all, not even close. But you know, that's how we try to. I think that is the next step. It's a very valid question. You're welcome, and I really appreciate being here. So thank you very much. I also want to say one last word to you, if I may. It's very difficult, of course, to be a student in these times of Corona, and you have to stick in your homes or in your student homes at this time. Keep pushing, keep going for it. We really need you in the aviation sector. Not at the moment. It may seem very, very bad, but I'm sure things will turn around very rapidly in the next half year or so. And that's why we really need you, you guys, you girls, in the next few years in the aviation sector. I'm sure about it. So keep pushing, keep going for it. Thank you very much for the attention.
Member of the board and the Vice President Europe and Africa of IOA. IOA is the International Aviation Women Association. I'm working since more than 30 years in the industry. My background is economist, and I started my career at Lufthansa, worked on the Brussels field with the European Commission. I worked on the CESAR innovation programs over many, many years, and globally with a lot of stakeholders of the industry. And I'm really enthusiastic to be today with you. And I heard more than 100 students, male and female, are today joining this Diversity Day of the TU Delft. Our industry is facing the deepest crisis ever. This crisis is unprecedented, and I don't know actually anybody who would have foreseen a crisis of this extent and of this duration. We faced a lot of crises in the industry, but this is something nobody saw ever, and yeah, hopefully also for a long future, not facing the same again. However, we will rebuild, and we will rebuild better. And this is a very, very important message, as many of you will also face challenges, not getting an internship, struggling in studies, and you know there are lots of people in the industry losing jobs, jobs are cut, people are on furlough, programs are stopped. So it's really a challenge you're observing for sure as a student in the sector as well. But there's light in the tunnel. One of the light in the tunnel is definitely 1.8 trillion program is going ahead in Europe for the next years for rebuilding the economy, and a lot of this money will be settled into innovation, digitalization, and green transformation. And this means a lot of innovation and a lot of new programs will be set up for your industry. Aerospace, obviously, is one of the growing fields, and Europe is strong in space. We have the European Space Agency, all the global cooperation programs, and we know that the embracing of space, of the operational and the business approach, is just starting now. And a lot is ongoing on satellites and communication, but also with new ideas of mining, flying to the Mars, not talking about the moon only anymore. Another sector is the drone sector, the unmanned air traffic, and the combination of the manned and the unmanned air traffic. Thus it's a field, it's growing already, but we will face in the next year an extremely further growth and very new business models and fields of operation based on everything on automation, on AI, digitalization, which has never been possible before. And talking about aviation. Aviation will be greener and sustainable. And you for sure all have heard about the Airbus program of the Zero Vision of 2035. And it's not only Airbus, as JK and Aerospace engines and many other companies working on that, doing the transformation for a new industry. And this is the classical sector of aviation. It's air traffic management. You have heard some words about that, where also everything will transform, and here we will rebuild better as well. And for doing that, we need the brightest minds. We need you. Yeah, this is a transformation which is not possible when not all the generations, the ones with experience, and all the youngsters like you with a new idea, with new technologies, are working together and bring all ideas into this prosperous new recovery. A word to the female audience. Iowa is very proud to be a sponsor for a scholarship, now a few years already, to sponsor one of the female students of the TU Delft. And we see, and I'm very happy to know, at least 2 of you already personally, and I hope to meet the others very soon as well, to support the participation of everybody in this process. And Iowa, we're really keen, and therefore I'm so sorry not being personally with you all together in Delft today, because we need this connection and we want to support the diversity, and Iowa is fully committed to the cooperation with the TU Delft. And therefore, again, the word to the male audience, embrace diversity. It's much more fun to work in diverse teams, and it brings the better performance and the better results. So there's definitely no reason not doing that. And slowly, even some of the older generation, and partly, or maybe part of that already, the female and the male are recognizing that. And it's not that we only need the full workforce of both genders, because we can't leave out 50% of the people. We need to embrace diversity by all means, by all backgrounds, all orientations, disability. We need all abilities and people who are not enabled to be on board and working together. Diversity brings the better results. Women in STEAM is therefore one of the key issues for Iowa. And we are really supporting you and the young female workforce, the girls, the student, to work in this field and to be encouraged to study in the MINT, or as you have said, in the STEM field. This is also one of the reasons for the scholarships. However, also some more news. So Iowa will offer memberships for students from next year onwards as well. And independent of gender, for all of you, I can recommend join mentoring programs. This is a great opportunity to get support from professionals. For the one who are interested, Iowa is offering a completely renewed mentoring program, but might be also many others. So it's not that you only necessarily have to come to Iowa. Have a look around and find your mentor. And that's a recommendation, not only for the female, but also for the male students today. And finally, some more personal words with reference to the current situation. We are all facing a really challenging world and challenging framework with the lockdowns. And many feel lonely. Many of us have these dark moments. So don't worry, you are not alone. Many of us having that threatened, and many as well have losses during this crisis and due to Corona. But you are not alone. Many of us have this difficult journey at the moment, and we need to stick together we need to connect. And this is what you are doing today. And therefore, in these times, it's even more important than ever doing that. And virtually as well, as we will have to face in a few more months, definitely, before we can get back to meet personally. As talking about meeting, tomorrow is a networking event. I'm really happy to join tomorrow. So if you have any question, I'll be there and happy to answer in the session any of your questions. The Iowa mission is connect, inspire, and lead. And in this spirit, I wish you a successful further Diversity Day, a great panel discussion, and I'm sure it will be great knowing who will be on the panel. And I wish you all personally the best in the situation. Keep your mood up. We need the brightest minds. You are the brightest minds. The industry will recover and you will be on board. So have a great panel discussion, and I hope to see you soon, either tomorrow or personally at any other Iowa event.
Hi. Hey, I am so glad you're watching. We have seen some tremendous advice from CEO from LVNL, Michiel van Dorst. But now, more over to you. In this panel discussion, we will discuss how to complement each other, but not aimed at CEOs, no, aimed at you. So we have brought here 5 panelists from the industry, and together we will discuss different themes. I'm going to introduce them. On our right, we have Kay from Domene, and she is currently working for Modis, which is working for ESA. She has a super cool background in space and has done many positions. Next to her is Jose Daenen from LVNL. He is Director of Operations, so he knows everything about the daily business of LVNL. Next to him, we have Elly Domene, who works for Assess Networks. Elly brings in customer experience to the company and makes it a priority in the corporate strategy. Then we have Julien van Campen, who we all know is a lecturer at our faculty. But apart from teaching courses, Julien also advocates for LGBT+ at the faculty. And then here on my right, we have Oana van der Togt, who after her PhD at the TU Delft has worked at the TNO in lots of positions in the space sector. So a very warm welcome for my panelists. So first of all, as we're talking about diversity, I want to ask the question to my panelists. Is this then the perfect team? Because we have quite some diversity here. So I want to ask my panelists, are we a perfect, diverse and inclusive team? Maybe? No? Julien disagrees.
No. Well, if I look at the panel, like we're not completely perfectly diverse. There's some groups, I think, missing to the table. For instance, neurodiverse people. I don't know you well enough, but I'm assuming that we do not fall in that category. Or also racial. I think it's also we're pretty wide here. So in that sense, no, we're not completely perfectly diverse.
All right. And Elly, do you think we are inclusive already?
That's difficult. I think from the call we had last week, I think we are pretty inclusive. At least that was the first impression. But as a team, how we deal with projects together, if we give each other sufficient space to share ideas, and if all of us feel safe to speak up, that we need more time.
Okay, all right. So just by bringing a lot of people to the table does not mean you already qualify for being a diverse and inclusive team. So how can we know that we are in a diverse and inclusive team? How do you know when your teamwork is right? Do we have someone?
Well, I think at the end of the day, you will be able to at least say about us if we've been inclusive enough, if we gave each other room to discuss different subjects. And when you look in your own environment, you should feel safe, you should feel at home yourself the way you are, with all the diverse aspects you are bringing at the table in terms of gender, in terms of sexual orientation, so in terms of religion, age, knowledge, way of thinking. And only after that, so if those diverse aspects are accommodated by the team in which you are working, then you can talk about a diverse team, diverse environment.
Okay.
I would say from having only met each other last week in preparation for this panel, indeed we need more time to know each other, but we all bring an open appreciation for variety in life and respect for other people that I immediately felt when we were talking last week that I would be happy to work in a team with anyone on this panel. So
I think the fact that we stood up and came forward is a step forward. I mean, on the outside, we look diverse, but we only talk about half an hour or an hour and a half last week, so we don't know on the inside yet. So would we be a perfect team? I think that would take some time, but it's a first step, and that's what we ended last week. That's where you need to go. You need to start with that first step.
I think also the passion that we feel for diversity and inclusion is what bound us together pretty quickly. And it helps to, when you have that same purpose and that same end goal, it helps to build on each other as well. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think that is because we're all used to, well, in our own way, that we're sometimes not being heard or not being respected in our own right, and that binds us and complements us actually as a team. So I think that is also one of the things, or what I would like to see being discussed today, or getting over the footlight, how we all actually strive for the same cause. And even the people who would not be considered diverse or a minority also actually have the same cause, I would say.
I totally agree with you. I think there's a merit for all in a shared world, because as being said by the panel, inclusion is not just about, it's about everyone feeling free to share the ideas that they have in their head without feeling that they need to apply a certain filter to fit or say something that, you know, is meeting the expectations of others. It's that freedom to share. And there's definitely a merit, not just for certain minorities, but for everyone to be more free at the workforce. And I think everybody wants a team where you can feel free to share whatever idea you have in your head. And we know that we are at a good start, but do we have some advice for people who are starting a project tomorrow who want to have this safe space at work? Do we have some good things to do, first things to do on the first work day?
Well, the way I think the way I always started my teams. I used to be a project manager and then later on program manager. So the way I started at the first meeting is, how are we working together?
Okay.
What works for you? What works for you? What works for everybody, and what doesn't work? So that's the first question I would address, and be open about it. You don't dare to do it in that environment because most probably, you know, there are new people, you don't know them. Then make sure you address it to offline to your colleagues. So in this case, to a project manager or program manager or your own direct manager. So and just listen very well to what the others are saying about what works for them. I think in this way you are just building an inclusive team. You are just building a team in which you feel comfortable to work with.
I've worked in a lot of international environments, more than 30 countries. Right now, my team is 11 countries, and we're only 13 people. So when you switch from one team to another, you do have to get to know each other and understand the different perspectives on problem solving, how people think, who's more introverted. We mentioned diversity is a bit more than just gender, sex, or ethnic background. It's also socioeconomic, where we were raised, our perspectives. So some of us think very differently, and you need more time to contribute in a team and to trust each other. I think the most productive teams have incredible trust that if anything goes wrong, their teammates have their back, and the project or the mission will not be compromised if one person is not available. So getting to know each other's strengths and weaknesses, a lot of the storming part of getting a team together, you have to get to know each other.
And that has to be nurtured. It doesn't just happen overnight. And I think now with COVID, it's harder to have team buildings, because team buildings I've always found very, very effective to get to know each other on a different level, on a personal level. So I think now with COVID, there's also things you can do in online settings. And as an attendee, try to arrive a little earlier so that the conversations that you have prior to the meeting starting, they usually start with, oh, where are you dialing in from? We are a global company as well. Oh, what background, like the image that you have on your team setting. Oh, what's that for? And just try to get to that personal, even if it's just a few minutes. It also helps introverts to relax a little bit, particularly if it's a big crowd that you'll be meeting with. And yeah, just allow for time for virtual getting together on a more personal level.
True, but in addition to that, it is also good to sometimes, and especially the more introverted colleagues, to really ask them, okay, speak up, please tell us what you think, and take them seriously, like really respond to them in a way and make them heard. And what is very important is also you bring some empathy with it, because as we heard earlier from Michiel van Dorst, we all think slightly differently. I cannot look into your head, but if somebody says something, try and think, okay, what is actually being meant here? And just go further than taking it on face value. I think that is very important.
But I think the challenge, if you're in a team, is that you usually listen to the loudest people.
Yeah.
So that makes it kind of difficult to give the accent to the people that are not the loudest. And you don't want to put them on the spot that, okay, now you can talk. You put them in an awkward position. So there's a step to make in finding that balance within your team. But in these situations now with COVID, it is really difficult. If you're online and then you still listen to the people who talk the most, who are the loudest, and you don't see the people that switch off the cameras and only listen. So it's same here. There's no audience. So how do you connect with something that is there, but that's not really there? So
self-awareness too, because I tend to be the person who talks too much. So early in my career, I had a very kind supervisor who once said to me, especially because it was a quite international team with a lot of people from Asia as well. So I would overtalk, and he's like, you have good potential, but you need to draw back and learn to listen. And sometimes that empty airspace then makes people who otherwise don't always step in take the floor, and you get really great contributions.
All right, so I hear you when you say that, okay, it also takes some self-awareness. For example, I tend to be quite wordy. I like to talk, and I don't shy away from a sentence or 5. So an advice for me was, okay, when you agree with someone, don't paraphrase everything they said, just say, agree. That's enough. So that's a trick that I had to learn. Do you have some tricks that you learned on how to adapt yourself to make sure that you're not overshadowing anyone in the team?
Well, a good start for me is to make something personal. Like Michiel shared something of your personal life. I think that helps. For me, that helps to share something that you encounter, that you have difficulties with. So you open that up and start that first steps of trust you gain in the team. So I'd like to start with then tell something of my own perspective, what challenges me, the things I encounter. So you drop that level of being on the top of the team, so everyone is equal on the table. So that helps for me.
I'll be honest, I don't always feel confident in a meeting, or there are moments where I feel confident. I feel confident to talk about my subject matter expertise, and totally fine. But there's also moments where I feel I don't have an engineering background, and it's a very much of an engineering topic. So I will be quiet until I'm giving the space to talk, which when I am very vocal, people are surprised that I can also be very quiet. But yeah, you can, even just one person can be different in different settings, and that's okay.
For me, it's actually the other way around. I have the tendency to really be the person on the background and not, just attending. And I need to force myself, okay, now I want to know this, so speak up, and I make myself heard. Otherwise, the point is just lost. So it's a very personal thing, but what is important is that you stay close to who you are, and no matter what trick you learn in this. So the self-awareness is, okay, this is who I am, I'm good as I am, and maybe with just a few adjustments, I'm a bit better in the cohesive context of the team, but that's it.
Okay, Then in the meantime, I have a message for the audience at home, because you are the quiet ones today. I can't literally hear you, but I do have a phone, and every question that you send in is coming in here, and then I will try to weave them into our talk. So if you have a question, please send them, and I'll merge them into the panel. So in the meantime, we talked about how to have a good start, and our advice is basically don't start right away, but first set a communication strategy, get to know each other, do a warm-up activity. But then when you are progressing as a team and you feel, are we still on the happy spot where we started? Are we still communicating with each other? Are we hearing everyone? Do you guys have some sort of warning signs to know that you are on a slippery slope to not including everybody, or to maybe overshadowing some people in the team?
Well, just for me, recently I got an intervention because I got kind of cut loose of the team because of the COVID, and then focus on the job you are doing, and it felt kind of awkward because it felt like a punch in the stomach, because they were warning me we are losing each other.
Yeah.
And that's a good sign. That means that your team is still cohesive, but so it's not my task then to get them on board, but it's their task to get me on board again. So it's not just from our perspective as we are sitting here thinking that's my job to do this. It's also your team that also gives that effort. So for me, it was that punch in the stomach that they said, okay, be right back and come join us again, because we can help you can help us, and we're a team, and that's how we move forward. It's not just coming from either one of us, I guess, but for me it was also the effect of the team that helps.
Okay.
I think it's interesting that, because COVID was mentioned a number of times, and what I experience in this post period is the fact that we are more alert to the reactions of the others.
Okay.
And often, it happens, and I've had a few discussions recently after a meeting, picking up the phone and saying, hey, is everything okay with you? Because I know there's a difference. But there are a number of ways you can discover that the team is going in the wrong direction, because you go into your own habits. There is a lot of workload. You focus, as Jose just mentioned, on getting the job done, and have a look at what's happening in your team. Be empathic, as Julien has mentioned earlier. Be open for feeling the other one. Show an emotional intelligence, not only being smart, but also feel for what the others are doing. And you will see standard approaches. From the loudest duck is going to be louder, and the other one will be quieter. So if you see somebody who's quiet, just ask, hey, what's your opinion? Or just have a just simple session. Guys, today it's not about the project. Today it's about us. How is it going? Are we still on the right track? Are we still talking with each other on the same way? Do you see some differences? Can we help each other? That's also okay in a project team.
I think in any activity, or when you have a goal or a particular project with a set time frame to accomplish something, you can see at different stages of the project, perhaps peaks where the stress is really high. And sometimes when you're under the largest financial or time pressure, sometimes members of the team start to need a little break, or it's really the emotional intelligence that you say, that caring for other people and seeing when the stress level is high, and maybe somebody needs to quit today at 4, and you say to your teammate or your colleague, take a break, or you deserve some time for something else, to refocus. It's sometimes hard, and people can take it the wrong way. So learning how to communicate too, in a way that will be appreciated or accepted by that team member, because you have to know their communication style. And I must say, in the area I work, a lot of people tend to be quite introverted, and they might prefer to not have to share every day. But if you know their signs, it's kind of an opportunity to avoid a problem, And when you said, what are the signs that a team might be going bad, sometimes you can tell somebody hasn't hasn't been getting enough sleep, the project's the most important thing, and they're running themselves into the ground at the expense of work. And it's kind of on all of us, either as leaders or as team members, to help each other. Sometimes it can even be you and you don't see it yourself, so you hope your team members say, hey, you know, time to quit today.
I think when I hear you, the first word that comes in my mind, and it's just popping up, is curiosity. Be curious about the one near you. Just show genuine curiosity.
And make it safe also to just share how you feel without feeling that if I'm overwhelmed, I don't dare speaking up because out of fear that people might think I'm not able to cope with my job. It's a feeling that exists right now, and it's okay. We all have emotions. Yeah. I think that's important as well, to make, you know, to be able to speak about how you feel, whether it's feeling left out, feeling not heard, feeling overwhelmed, feeling happy.
It's not a sign of weakness.
No, it's not, absolutely.
Yeah, but for the person that's new or maybe it feels that way.
Yes, but that's why I think actually as a leader, it's your main priority to look after your team. I think you have to look at how they feel, because if they feel good, they'll perform good. You have to trust that. But as peers, I mean, we all co-share a responsibility to be there for each other, to have each other's back, and to just be there.
Elly, I think you've really defined safe, is where you can talk about how you are doing with nobody doubting your ability to perform on the job. Yeah. I think maybe that's the definition of a safe space. And I'm wondering, when you start in a new team, how do you make sure, even when you're not the leader, even when you're not the team manager, how do you create such a safe space that you don't need to worry when you say, oh, today is not my day, that somebody is like, oh, how do you create this safety?
I don't know, it's up to you. I mean, it's up to the people that are around you. They have to create a safe space. It's not you. Yeah. I think you need to be warmed in and welcomed in and feel that safe space. So I think it's either the opposite party that has to create it, instead of you wanting to put a space around you that you want to feel safe. So it's a gift you get from the other one.
I think it's the leader again. The leader has to create an inclusive culture within the team, and then hopefully within the company. But it's where when new people join, it's actually something that everybody is tasked to do. This person is welcomed into the team, and we have to make them feel welcome.
Mm-hmm. That is true, but for the team members, well, of the team you're joining into, it's actually very simple. Just show interest, actually we can all do it, but it often doesn't happen. If I think of the team I work in, like it's not even at the verge of the slippery slope of not being diverse. It's actually at the very end where it's not diverse, sadly. Not inclusive, not safe. So it's very hard to recognize that and to do something about that.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. Okay.
I've been in teams that are very homogenous, very skilled, but super homogenous. And I just have more fun. And I think many people will choose diversity and inclusion over time, because once you've had the opportunity to be in a diverse, inclusive team, and once you've tasted what a fantastic team is like and what you can accomplish, sorry, I don't want to go back. You know, so, you know, we talk about quotas, and it was mentioned earlier, you know, that's a tough way to get started. But the answer there was, you know, nobody's lowering the standards. The competition is just larger, and you have amazing teams when you look at such a wide scope and you draw from such a huge talent pool. But that doesn't mean anyone else doesn't still have the opportunity. And I mean, also there's gender and age as well. We have a very large scale between, you know, young people in the team and people nearing retirement. And that is also an important thing, to have balanced knowledge transfer from the people who have so much knowledge to give to younger generations before they move on to the next phase of their life. So I think it sells itself once you get to experience it.
I think we had.
No, I was actually thinking about something that Julien said, but also coming to Kai. I recognize what you're saying because I used to be at TU Delft, very international team, and then I moved to just one floor up in the same building.
Yeah.
And then my first experience, my first thought was, shit. Oh, excuse the language. I moved in a different country. It's a completely different culture. Well, coming back, I think it's true. You know, the team should give you the gift of including you, but I also think that you have also a role you can play.
Yeah.
And as a newcomer, you see way faster the differences and things that could be improved or things you can value. And through your own attitude, you can change the environment around you. So I moved in a fully Dutch environment with just 4 foreigners, and you have 2 options. You adapt, or you say, well, I adapt slightly, or I keep to the way I am. Well, I can tell you I'm Latin. I will still touch until the end of my life somebody, because that's normal in my culture and it's in my DNA. And then I decided this is something I can't change.
Yeah.
It's shocking, but they will get used to me. And this is the value you can add yourself, also to the team spirit and the team building.
Okay, and I think some of the people viewing are maybe waking up and realizing, hey, I am not in a diverse or inclusive team, or maybe they find themselves in a position where they feel excluded. And sometimes you are empowered to change the entire team, but quite often you're not. So do we have any advice for people who face a situation where they now clearly realize I am being excluded?
Speak up. You did it. It's your responsibility, I think, to start the discussion. Of course, it's difficult, and probably you're in an unsafe position because you are somehow a minority. But at least find the courage, maybe if you cannot speak up directly, to take someone in confidence and talk with this person, and then slowly build an alliance. I think, and that's also links to the theme of today. It's all about how do you complement each other. And if you come to think about it, we all, in some way or another, belong to a minority. That's not every one of us. Like that, there is something that sets us apart from everybody else. And with that mindset, you become a lot stronger, because there's much more that binds us and than separates us. But find the courage to speak up, or speak with a colleague, and slowly make that space larger, I would say.
Yeah, and don't change for the sake of belonging into a group that, well, refine you can do a little bit, but if you fundamentally have to change who you are in order to be included in a group, that's just not your group. Then that you'll be much happier in another group, whether it's in another department or, but I do agree with you. Start with speaking up, because often by just addressing it, you create this awareness with the other people, and they might not even be aware that they're excluding you because they weren't aware of your feelings, and you're giving them the chance to include you. So
no, it's the same, that the other side cannot look into you, how you feel. Yeah. So if you want to open up, you have to let them know that, because they don't know how you feel, and vice versa. So it's a boldly step probably, but you have to start somewhere. So and sometimes you get a bit ignored or whatever, but you have to keep on persevering, and it's the resilience you need to train, and sometimes it's difficult. Mm-hmm. I mean, for me, it changed about 12.5 years ago when I became a wheelchair independent or dependent, and my whole world changed. So instead of being a strong person, I had to ask for help all the time. So it put myself in a complete different situation. Therefore, I had to adjust as well, but nobody can see on my inside, and I cannot see on the other one's inside, okay, how they perceive me and how they see my needs, or just not my needs in sometimes. So you have to be a little bit bold.
And there's also something that I think is important to mention, that diversity is also in skills. You may be everything might be the exact same. You may look the same, you may be the same gender, the same beliefs, everything, but then you have different skills. So that's diversity too. And if you're able to leverage those skills and include them, then that's inclusion too. So sometimes that's another angle that could benefit.
Okay. And now,
sorry, if I still may make a point. But also the other way around, like it could also be that you see that a colleague of yours is actually struggling, or you think they might be struggling. Also dare to ask this person, okay, is everything all right? And I think that two-way street, because sometimes a person really does not dare to take matters in their own hand.
well, Julien, you form a perfect bridge to a question we have from the audience. What do you do when you see somebody in your team excluding somebody in your team, and you want to do something, but you know that this is going to be an uncomfortable conversation? Any advice on how to address a situation?
Well, I think you just speak up, but I would do it one-on-one.
Yeah.
Approach the person who is having the exclusive behavior separately. Also approach the person who is excluded. Check with that person if he or she feels excluded, because we might feel different, as it was mentioned earlier. And then you can see, you can take also a bit step further, bring everybody together and discuss with your whole team about what is exclusive behavior and what not, because a lot of the times we are doing it unconsciously. It's what in this world is called unconscious bias. Yes, we all have it. Even all of us who are talking about, diversity and inclusion, we all have a certain bias because of the way we have been brought up or educated or our social environments.
True, but it's very important if you address a person that you also give this person the possibility of a safe exit. Like it might be that they're not ready or not in a place where they can actually discuss this. For instance, if I think back to my study years, if anyone would have approached me like, "Are you gay?" I would have freaked out. I would be like, no, it would have been very bad. So, yeah, you need to find it's a delicate thing to address it, you think.
Okay. We have another question. I am uncomfortable in teams where the formal style of clothing is the only option. Oops. What do you think is possible to say to people with a different color of hair or a different type of clothing who feel unemployable? Okay.
Well, I think there is an organization for each type of employee.
Yeah.
And to be fair, I mean, I'm like you in a suit today, so sorry for the viewer, but it's also related to functions. So in our company, we have engineers who are coming in jeans and t-shirts, and if you will see me quite often, I'm also in jeans and t-shirts, and if it's needed, I'm in a suit. So there is a place for everybody, and I think that's tapping into the previous discussion. If you don't feel included, it's not only about speaking up, but it's also about doing a self-analysis. Is this for me worthy to go ahead and push and change the current situation? Or it's for me the moment to step aside and find a different path. And that's also okay. So it's my message would be, look at yourself and find a place and a job and an environment in which you are comfortable.
Yeah. Yes, Oana, and sometimes it's your team member and maybe they weren't aware of it and maybe they are instantly ready to change and maybe it has a very happy ending, but it can also occur that it's happening within between ranks. Perhaps it's your own supervisor who is not including you. This can also occur. And then I wonder, and that's my dilemma for you guys, is it always worth it to address to address problems that occur around diversity and exclusion? If it's your supervisor, would you still then address the issue, start the uncomfortable situation, or would you then say, well, maybe protect your job or find another path?
Those are very difficult situations and conversations to have. I have had to deal with some of them, and I was fortunate in that I was usually the bystander or the observer of the situation when someone had things quite hurtful said to them. And any organization usually has support people you can talk to if it's really bad. You know, you have an ombudsman, or you should go to a colleague or a friend and really seek it. I mean, depending on what the level of the infraction or the insult is, it's really a special case, but you should never be made to feel lesser. And to be super empathetic, you should wonder what's wrong with your superior. Like, what is going on with that person in their lives that they're, you know, perhaps bringing bad sentiments to work. So sometimes that person might actually need an intervention as well. It's really not an easy question to answer because it's a hypothetical, but there's always a solution. So if you're miserable, find a solution, talk to people, you know, don't let it eat at you, I think.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, but I can understand if you're just starting to work at a company and it's your first job, it's really difficult. I mean, how do you know how to act, what to wear, how to blend in, because you want to blend in, how's your performance? You got so many tasks to do, and then I think you put this maybe aside because you don't even look at it, people are biased. Maybe you don't even recognize it. Like Michiel was saying, I raised my daughter to be open-minded and get a perspective on life that everybody's equal. But if you're raised not that way, how do you know how it's going? And maybe you accept the things that are going, but it makes you unhappy. So yes, there are people, and yes, you can talk to them, and maybe you have friends that will listen, but does it solve the problem at the workplace? I don't know. I mean, I can understand that. It's really difficult. Maybe you're happy after 15 rejections that you have your first job, and you say, okay, I'll hang on to this and cling on, and we'll see in a year and we'll see how it goes. And so yeah, hypothetically, I understand your question, but I also understand if you're at that age, you're 20, 24, it's difficult because, okay, we're probably a little bit older than that, but so we met our.
But I've had 7 employers since I was 24, so there's other jobs.
Yes.
You know, don't stay in a situation where you don't feel that you're comfortable or can be who you want to be. But at the same time, you know, I'm not saying quit tomorrow, but you know, the thing is, most of the people who are here and are listening to this conversation care. So seek out people who are your friends, who are interested in this and helping you.
And I think it's helpful that more and more people and companies are talking about diversity and inclusion. So there are more and more people inside a company that I think you can turn to for advice, for guidance, because I agree, it's so damaging when you're feeling that your injustice is done to you in whichever shape. And I think staying in that situation is only going to make it worse for you. So definitely find someone who can help you, but do speak up, don't be quiet. And if there's no solution, then yes, there must be some other role or even another company.
Yes, I think it's very important that you realize if you're unhappy in such a situation that you can never reach your full potential. So the question is, do I like this job so much that I would like to do something about it? And if the answer is no, probably move on to a different job where you fit better and where you actually are heard and respected. And this is also something I notice actually with students at our faculty, that if they're really struggling with something, they can perform for a very long time very well, and then there comes a point that their performance just breaks down because they've carried it so far and they can't get any further because there's something wrong. And then, well, the question is, okay, what is going on? So it's not entirely the same, but I think still also there on university, it's very useful to have this discussion in a slightly different setting.
I think what I notice often is that people tend to have that discussion with a superior the moment they feel they don't have anything to lose anymore.
Okay.
Or that the injustice, which Elly just mentioned earlier, is so severe that you say stop. And we heard actually in the video of your guest from NASA, of Christine, that she said, well, I went there because I had another job aligned at the school. So she had a safe net. So if you feel that you are in a situation which you cannot have anymore for whatever reason, again, look at yourself. Is it worthy the fight for you? Ensure that you have a safety net in terms of people, another job. And then if you decide it's okay, I want to go for it because I want to change it for the generations to come or for my colleagues, then go for it. But you know that you will have a very hard time. And if not, it's okay. Like it was said earlier, just find a different place, because at the end of the day, like it or not, your career will depend on your relationship with your direct manager.
And sometimes it turns out okay. Yes. Sometimes it's I used to be, there was at one point I was in a team full of men, and they were all very vocal, and we had 90 minutes weekly meetings, and then everybody would get their say in those 90 minutes, and then usually 2 or 3 minutes prior to ending the meeting, oh, Elly, do you have something to say? Do you have something to update us on? And in the beginning, I tried to speak as fast as I could in those 3 minutes to give the update. But then at one point I thought, seriously, 90 minutes and I get 3, everybody else gets like 20 minutes. So I stopped. And then I thought, okay, that's not the solution either. So I spoke to my manager and I told him, I don't know if you're realizing how disrespectful I feel this is to me, by just giving me at the very end, when everybody's closing their laptops, giving me the time to talk. So he wasn't aware, and turned around, and then it would just rotate. It would be, you know, whatever, but it would never be the same order with me at the end. So sometimes it does help, and it was scary, so scary to speak up at that point. But then you do that once, and you think, you know what? Actually, if it turned out like this, next time I'll speak up again, and that helps.
Thank you, Elly. I'm glad that that situation changed. I notice sometimes when we speak about including more people and minorities, the conversation turns rather defensive, and people feel like, oh, something is being taken away. And that's the last thing you want, because you want to find a sort of common ground when you have a conversation about inclusion. Do you have any advice for how to reach that common ground when you have a difficult conversation?
I think Kay said it before, self-awareness is really important. So your own biases as well, your own fears. Why am I reacting to something this way? And in our company, it's also predominantly male. And we have those conversations as well. Well, why a white male is now almost in the disadvantage? Why? I think that question was asked previously. We have those discussions in our company as well. And it's talking about it more than anything. Just talk about it. Talk about.
I think too, when you're going to have a difficult conversation, you need to know what outcome is your objective. Before you go into the conversation, what is it that you need to achieve with the person you're going to be talking to? And then how can you possibly strategically disarm them to put them in either a trusting or a good mood? So letting them tell you their side of the disagreement or the issue first, and just really listening while they tell you. And then there's usually something in there that you can concede that you did or you said, or maybe isn't perfect in the world in general, and you agree could be better. And then I think that can set a more conducive tone for the negotiation of the difficult topic.
And I think it's following that, because the outcome is very important, but also make from the beginning everybody sure that it's not one against the other. You know, when you talk about diversity, first of all, you cannot talk in terms of black and white. That's it. It has a lot of shades of gray in between. And it depends on a number of things, which is, first of all, our own personalities. But make sure it's not about me against you, whoever you are and whoever I am. But it's about achieving something beautiful together. And if you set that tone, as was earlier mentioned, then you should have a pretty good discussion. And if not, just you know, just go ahead, just have the discussion, see what the outcome is, and then you can continue a second time. If you didn't reach what you wanted with your conversation partner, you can say, okay, I need to think about it. Let's plan another discussion.
And what can often happen is also that people easily or too easily get offended by something,
Yes.
and that hardens the discussion so much. So it is important for both parties to also do some introspection and think like, okay, what is the other person saying here? And maybe I should back down a bit, and then I can achieve much more.
I also think it helps when you introduce feelings into that conversation, don't you
yes.
think? Because feelings are never wrong. You just feel how you feel, and
Explain yourself,
right?
like this makes me feel unsafe or unhappy, or this offends me, or and understand also where the other party is coming from. That you need to have the discussion and the common goal. We have a common goal in the end, so that is.
It's interesting you use the word defensive, because I think in a perspective, if you talk to that other person, it might sound like that way, because maybe that person hears it for the third time that day or fourth time, but still from my point of view, and I think the way we're sitting here at the table, it just takes that amount of time. You have to repeat it over and over. And like you say, what is the outcome you want to get out of this conversation? Do you want to make it a win situation or just a step forward and open up as well? So I think it's a good perspective to look at what's the outcome going to be in this conversation. Sometimes, you know, this is someone who's opening up and you go a little bit further, but it takes time. It's perseverance. You need to have this conversation several times if you want to be who you want to be. And it takes courage. And sometimes it gets you back disappointment, but keep your chin up and move on. And have the next conversation where you gain something. It's sometimes disappointing, I understand, because I understand it myself. And like you say, opening up and sharing some feelings, how can you point the finger at, this is how it makes me feel? It's not something you can blame or give a number that's wrong or right.
Okay, thank you, Jose. I really appreciate the mentions of self-awareness, and I fully agree. If you know why you respond in a quite emotional or in a quite, touched way to somebody's response, if you know it, then you can explain it, and that also maybe helps them to explain you. So now we have a question from the audience. The question is, thank you for the open conversation. I have quite a hard question for you. What bias towards others do you yourself have or had that you struggled with in work, or that you had to change? Maybe
Well, I can spice it up. It's quite embarrassing, if not. Since 2016, and I was born and raised in America, everyone, and the advent of the political changes that happened in 2016 and things that I've seen go on in my home country, I started to have resentment towards the establishment that is powered by, don't take it the wrong way, men here, but old white men. And I love my grandparents who are dearly departed and lots of people, but I mean, I started to feel towards certain American senators and people in power and certain agencies and institutions actual anger that I brought home to the point where after white supremacists walked through North Carolina, I wanted to throw out every pair of khaki pants that my husband owned and change the entire paradigm of how I'm raising my two boys and how they think, because I'm thinking, how is this possible that our society, America and world over, you see it in many countries, is becoming so polarized? So I think part of the reason I'm sitting up here is that we all have to understand each other and meet each other halfway, and diversity and inclusion and understanding of the person who is different than you, whether it's because they're from the rural countryside or a city or a different ethnic background, is vital to the advancement of our shared future. Because what I've been seeing in the country I'm from has scared me dramatically. And so I see myself being mad at a population of people who I used to revere, my grandfather and the leaders in my political society, and I'm trying to remember, I'm being completely biased because as it was said by the CEO earlier from LVNL, he's in his spaceship, his body. He was born a white male. No one chooses how you're born. This is the vessel we're given to go around in, but I shouldn't assume something just because of someone's appearance or their background. And that has been really hard because it's just shocking to me how the world has changed so much. Because I thought everything was peachy. I had a great career, early start, and I have had a lot of privilege in my whole life. And really, until 2015, 2016, I thought we had solved so many problems. And then it turns out, oh, we still have a lot of problems to solve. So,
thank you, Kate. Yeah. Do we have any additions on biases that we had to overcome ourselves? Or maybe someone wants to respond.
Yeah, well, but yeah, there is, or at least what I recognize in myself, I try to live up to very high standard, but my bias is that I expect the same standard from everybody I interact with. And if that doesn't happen, then I'm very easily that I think like, really, do better. And I try to not let it show, but it's hard sometimes.
Okay.
So.
I'm biased when new people come into the company and they don't take the time. If I don't think they take the time to just understand why certain things are in place and why certain things are not in place, and they come in with an attitude of, I'm going to be the hero and save the world, I react to that. And I am aware of that. So I try now to not react and just take the time again to know that person, because that can also be a mask of insecurity, right? Of I just want to be, I want to demonstrate that this company did well in hiring me and I can contribute. So yes, but it's a bias.
Well, I noticed that I'm working in a male environment, and often I'm the only woman at the table. And I kind of got used to the male way of communicating. So I caught myself some years ago, and now you need to understand I work in our company for 7 years on gender diversity. And it's quite painful to realize that you have the same bias. Sometimes you're preaching to others, to make others aware that they are having. But I caught myself that I appreciate more the directness in a conversation between a male predominant world than, well, the large conversation we have on the same subject if there are more females in the environment. And I'm aware, like Elly mentioned, I'm aware of it, and I pay attention to it. But it was very painful to realize it a few years ago. So I had to put quite some work to change that.
My biggest one was being with LVNL for 28 years, and about 28 years it was really male dominated. And I think we're up to 30% now, like Michiel said, and I think it was maybe 2 or 3% were women. So you get also within the flow of being biased of that way. So then you think, okay, it can only be male who work here, and it took me a really long time to get past, and I caught myself in being biased that way, also in training and etc. So yeah, coming from that, I understand how you can become biased as well by being in a certain environment and being in a workflow, and the peer pressure of the other ones will strengthen this bias. So yeah, it's a huge change for me now, sitting here and being 30% female, not far enough for me, but we're getting there.
Yeah, it's quite remarkable. You've worked 28 years at LVNL. You've been there way longer than Michiel has been there. Would you say it was a culture shock, or was it just a smooth transition?
No, it was a culture shock.
It was a culture shock.
I think prior to about 2 or 3 years before I came, there were no female toilets. So that's how it was.
Ooh.
So yes, coming from that perspective, and with the new CEO, CFO, yeah, there's quite a shock going on. like he was saying, the board members change, everything changes, and you see people in the working place, you hear them whispering, okay, all the females that are entering the building now is just to get the quotum. They're not the talents. So it's really a step forward to creating a safe place as well, because there's still a lot of people that even work longer than I do that are still in that mindset of it should be male dominated and it's not fair, and the women that get selected and hired are not chosen because they're good, they're chosen because they're either women or they're a minority or ethnic group. So it's a huge cultural change indeed for everyone. So it takes good leadership to guide this and to put people at ease and let them know that the quality is there. Same for me, my management team changed from all male to 50-50 male-female. And it took me a long time because I work with those professionals that some of my guys that are in my team are even longer there and they're male dominant. And it's really hard for them to accept it. But it took me about 3-4 years because I'm in this position now. And now they accept it and they see the value and they see the added value to the team. So yeah, it takes a long time, but and even more time. And sometimes I think you get at this point where it becomes scary for a half of the company maybe, that they think, okay, we're overwhelmed now by the other half. Like Michiel was saying, okay, but it's not the 3.5 billion people that are in the world, it's the 7 billion. For some people that can be scary. So it's a tipping point where you go and it takes good leadership and a safer place to, also for the other party now maybe, instead of the minorities, we used to see them as minority, becoming more active in the workplace.
Do you think it's a generation thing? Do you think that younger people
Of course it's a generation thing. Well, you're looking back at how are the old white men. Yes, it's a generation thing. If I look at my father, I think, whoa, he is biased, he's old-fashioned, and he raised me good. I mean, but still, his mindset is completely different. And the next generation will be better than we are probably.
Yeah, because things are changing so fast now. I think you have to, I think the younger generation doesn't even have to be convinced how important diversity and inclusion is, because without it, you won't be able to keep up with change.
No, if I look at my 15-year-old daughter, how active she is in those things and how she cares for the LGBT communities and how she thinks that everybody should get an equal chance. It's amazing to see. I mean, when I was 15, I didn't look at the world that way, but yes, it's a time and it's an age thing. So
I think this, the fact that we are today at the table invited by students, it's already a very good indication that their generation, your generation, is having different priorities. And for us, I mean, I really appreciate it. Like Jose said, when I was at the university at TU Delft, my focus was not on diversity and inclusion. I have to say we were, I believe, a diverse and inclusive team, and that has to do with leadership, definitely. But you guys also have a leader who is really focusing on diversity and inclusion in your dean. So yeah, there are some amazing steps made by yourself, and go and discuss with your leadership, because Henry will be very open to hear what you have to say.
I would even go a step further than TU Delft and the people sponsoring today. I would say in general, as an immigrant to this country 13 years ago, I was astounded that I could vote in a municipal election. Like you're living in part of the community and you're invited to be part of it. And I do think, despite nowhere is perfect, that one of the things that has given the Netherlands probably one of the highest standards of living in the world is the view that including people and looking outside your borders and being global is good for the world, and it's good for commerce, it's good for business. And I mean, we all want good return on our time and the days we spend in our lives. And I think the Dutch samenleving, or the society in general, I'm astounded by how you can value respecting your neighbors and giving every child an excellent education through the public school systems. And that's why these children at 15 are also amazing. I do think it's a generational thing. Younger people are better with inclusion, but I must say the education system here is fantastic, I think.
Well, allow me to be a bit more negative, even though it's
Yeah.
very fantastic that we're here, but I think we need to be vigilant because it's something that easily can slip through our fingers. And if I look at the developments in Dutch society, comparing the time that I grew up in the 80s and 90s, the Netherlands were a lot freer and happier than they are actually currently. So actually you see slow decline rather than, yippee, we're doing better. Also in the educational system, speciaal onderwijs, it's not really a nice place also for some issues also recently in the news. But what I think that has brought us here and what is very important, and I want to add to what Oana said, is we need role models. Like this is only happening if you have role models and if the youth growing up sees, okay, this is possible. And if I actually adhere to this minority, I will still be fine. I will be safe. I can have a career. And when I studied here, actually at the faculty, there was only one openly gay lecturer, for the rest not. And yeah, so that is the reason I wanted to step in there and be this role model and show this. And if I look at the number of colleagues or how many people are employed at the Faculty of Aerospace Engineering and the number of people who are out, that there must either be very few gay people who work there, or some of my colleagues are not out, like one of the two. So I don't know which one, but it's something we need to work on. And even now in 2020, there's people who do not dare to be themselves or show themselves in an intellectual setting as a TU Delft. So for me, that is actually staggering. So there I want to be a bit more negative.
Thank you, Julien. I think a trait of good is striving for better. So yes, we are maybe good or acceptable, but we need to strive for better. Now, another thing is after studying, you reach a new job. And of course, you want to show yourself and you want to show your personality. But then to some traits, there might be biases. So we have a question from the audience who says, do you think that students who suffer from mild versions of autism, ADD or other mental disabilities should mention this when they try to find a job? You mentioned diversity is great, but there are stigmas. And when it comes to teamwork, there might be some stigmas and ideas to people who suffer from such a disability. Would you say mention it in your job interview or maybe not?
That's such a difficult one.
Yeah. I'll say no.
No, it's, probably not.
Let that come later. Because if you have, I once had a interview that also went the way that I was asked things that were not appropriate. And when you volunteer or you get in that situation, you never know how it will be perceived. And the goal of a job interview is to get an offer. You know, that's the objective of a job interview. After you have the offer or you have multiple offers, then you make your decisions on what second conversations you have. But I would not in an interview put that out there for.
And to add to that, I think you should be hired more on the merit of what you've achieved in your education than on what condition you might have, because you are functioning and you have all the tools and the things to function with that condition. So it does not change you. You still were able to achieve that level or that diploma. So yeah, I would not mention it straight away, but if it comes up, don't make a secret out of it either.
Well, it starts in schools already.
Yeah.
I mean, there are schools who are not admitting, if they can choose, if it's a popular school, they won't say it's true, but it's happening. Where children who don't have that will be, included earlier on. So it's a tough one. I'm just hoping that that will just keep improving and keep raising the awareness of, because there's a role for every skill. I mean, if we take autism, for example, there are things that people with autism can do better than people that don't have autism. So let's talk about that. Let's include them. Let's just do a little bit more research and take a chance. Just give them a chance. That would be not for the students, but for the people hiring the students. That would be my plea.
That means you're relying on the other side instead
Yes,
of.
help.
Yes, I know. But I
And
agree. I wouldn't mention it in a first interview because the bias on that is amazing. I mean, I experienced it myself. As soon as I got in my wheelchair, people also questioned my mental ability. So they either spoke over me or not against me, because I remember signing in my son when he was 5 at a football club, and they pushed the papers to sign him in to my wife instead of me, because they looked at me being in a wheelchair, they're biased. He's mentally retarded or whatever, so he cannot read or fill out these papers. It's shocking, but that's the way the world is. So I would take this one off the table, indeed.
Okay. We have another student who says some people in the sciences are affected by Asperger's syndrome or other forms of social anxiety. Should we want more teamwork and group work together if we might then disadvantage some people who are not at their best in a group?
Well, I think as a leader, I think you need to know your teams, and you need to, if there is a situation where somebody just doesn't thrive in a team but is a great subject matter expert, then just give that person what they need to be, because you can still feel included. You don't have to, hug and just be all in. You can still be part of the team and contribute through your own strength.
Yeah, I agree. I completely agree with that, because the moment we hired you, we also have the obligation of accommodating you so that you can perform to the best of your capabilities. And just learning to know your team means accommodating his needs or her needs. So I think I am happy to say that some of the companies right now really are paying attention towards distance to the market, so people with disabilities. We are not here at that though. So I would really appreciate the fact that that the process of hiring somebody should be focused actually on the qualities and what you have achieved. But in practice, like Jose has said, it's a lot of bias in it, and we are not yet there to just easily accommodate somebody with special needs at the first discussion.
Okay, so now I have a dilemma for you. If you have just finished studying and you are ready to get your first job and you have a certain dream company that you want to work for, you've dreamed of this throughout your studies, and when you are there at your first interview, you feel a certain bias, or you feel a certain, didn't know it was like this in this company's working culture. Maybe you even feel, maybe you are part of a minority and you feel, ooh, my chances are definitely lower. Should you then withhold from taking this job or pursuing to get hired, or can you say, just get in and then change?
Well, I can answer that because I've been in that situation, I guess.
Yeah.
I came from TU Delft, and at that point I was actually working, I was having patent on my name and working on a strategy development for Carl Zeiss in Germany. So I came at the interview having a very strong background, being seen as one of the potential in the world in my field. And then at the interview, the ladies told me, the HR colleague told me, you don't bring any value to my company. And I thought, seriously? So I went through her and I said, well, so, somebody who knows all those programs I know, you need to invest in them in 5 years at least. And then being able to get a patent on, the work I did, it's quite some effort. And you say that I don't bring any value. So I stood up, I put my hand, and I said, thank you for your time. In this case, Daenen is not the company for me. And I sent an email to the hiring manager. And I told him, if this is the way you're treating your employees, then this is not the company for me to work. And within 2 minutes after pressing the send button, I really got a phone call and I've been asked, what's the situation, what has happened? Then I've been told, in a few minutes, you are going to get a call from her. And indeed, in a few minutes, I got a call from our HR colleague. And I thought, well, if this is how you are as a leader, then I definitely want to work for you. Now, I also have to say that I had a few discussions with our HR colleague, and we had until she left the company, we had a very good relationship. But what I want to mention with this is, again, it's your personal choice.
Yeah.
Being the company you've dreamed of to work at or not, see how the click is, and you decide for yourself, is this the way you want to continue or not? And a yes answer or no answer, both of them are good enough. It's your own choice, it's your own life.
Yeah.
Take that decision for yourself.
I like that in your example, you had a safety net, you had a position for where you could make a bold statement, because it was like either this job or not. It was not like you were going to lose your job. You sort of had nothing to lose, and you choose to make
No,
a bold
I had
statement.
everything to lose, because my contract at Delft was ending. So I needed a job.
Yeah, but I'm glad you decided to make the bold statement and see what happens, and it did change. So
yes, but there are my values.
Yeah.
So it went beyond what I found acceptable. I knew my own value, and that's very important. Know your own value. And we had previous discussion. I think Jose mentioned it. People believe that women are brought in companies because we want to improve the quota. Well, let them believe that, but know that you yourself are there because of your value, because of your experiences, because of the results you have obtained. So know your value, and based on that, you can decide what you want for yourself.
Okay,
that's my view.
Yeah, no, I fully agree. And in your example, it also depends on how big the dream was. But if it's really your dream job, go for it, and then try to make the change. Like if this is really what you had put your mind to, yeah, and then you can still reach the conclusion, okay, tried it, wasn't for me, also fine. But then you live and you learn, but you can at least try. And if you don't try, yeah.
But don't overstep your boundaries,
no.
Right?
Yeah.
No.
I mean, no matter how great something seems to be, if it requires you to just deviate too much from who you really are, then yeah, I guess that's the line that you shouldn't cross. But before that line, yes, you should try it out, because sometimes the first impression can also be different to what it's like when you actually work there.
Yeah. And sometimes even, maybe this is a strange example, it can be in your advantage to be part of a minority. When I worked for Mercedes-Benz, they were like, oh, you're the Dutch guy. Like it was always like the bonus to be the nice Dutch guy. So it can help sometimes.
Yeah, it all depends on what your expectations are. I mean, you think it's your dream job, but it's not always true. But I understand if you're younger, you need to establish those boundaries, but you also need to find out what those boundaries are. And sometimes you need to bump your head a few times, maybe. Like you said, I've had 7 jobs, and probably for different reasons. But that's the way it goes in lives. I'm the worst example, maybe working for a company 28 years, but that's because we create such specialists that after a certain amount of time, the people that work there it's hard to change. And also, it's a good employer, you make a lot of money, so you step in a golden cage. So that's also the company I work in, we see not a lot of movements. So if there's a lot of males or females at a certain position, it stays that way. And that's a pity, because there's more out there in the world and you need to explore that. But if you see your dream job, yes, sure, pursue it. But like you say, don't overstep your boundaries. But I can imagine that if you are young, it's hard to find those, but that's life.
So perhaps an advice to our students is find out what your boundaries are.
Yes.
Find out what your values are, so you know when you are overstepped, when your boundaries are being overstepped.
Well, to go back to the example of if the way you dress is quite out there, and you realize that there's a certain bias, and you are in the lobby and you can see all these people all suited up, then yeah, you can try it, but you will already know that it might be difficult to blend in. But if in the interview you're asked to, I don't know, maybe you have piercings or tattoos or something, and you're asked if they can be removed, or then you're kind of already getting a feel for, I will have to change in order to be successful here. And if then you feel like it's worth it because I really, really want this job, that's fair enough, then that's fine. But if you feel like, I don't really want that because these tattoos have a story, these piercings are, they're me, they represent who I am, then that's where I would say you have a clear, even as a young person, you would have a clear boundary that you're overstepping.
Okay, then we have a question from our students. What do you think is the biggest misperception of inclusion and diversity?
For me, we're talking about quotas, and Michiel said, I believe in quotas. I don't believe in quotas because I think that's a misconception. If you put a quota on it, then you will receive it, or you will get there. It's more than that. It's maybe something that will start it, but to keep the fire burning, it's not the quota at the end that helps. Maybe as a start, but not at the end of what you want to achieve. And what scares me most is, okay, as soon as you get the quota, do you stop then? Yeah. Good, we reached it. Okay, it's fine now. We're good to go. We have the 35% we need, and let's move forward. No, it doesn't stop there. So, for me, the answer is not particularly a quota.
Yeah, I would agree. I kind of go forth and back, but I also think a misconception is that if you take, I think they say you need 3 women in your board in order to have some diversity. Well, what if those 3 women, or 2 out of the 3, have a very male thinking and leadership style? Then what do you achieve then? Or equally, there might be men who are more in touch with their emotions when they, well, in the workspace. You cannot generalize too much, and I think that is also one of the things.
Yeah, and another thing is probably a lot of organizations, they, for instance, like to participate in Purple Friday or Coming Out Day, but those are just 2 days in a year, and then they're like, oh, see, we're diverse and inclusive. No, it's really more of a cultural change that is needed. So I think that is also a misconception, that as soon as you think, okay, this company does that, then it must be fine. No, it needs to be a bit deeper.
It is an organizational culture thing, but to some degree, and I've gone back and forth on my personal feelings about quotas over the years, but then I work now at the European Space Agency, the Tech Center, STEC, and an intergovernmental agency that is tied to European nations all trying to get their fair share of a return. They have to put in geographic return, and that then means certain positions are hired according to what nationality people have. And the thing is, there's so many qualified people that you're still getting the absolute best engineers and scientists and experts from within Europe. So, you know, everyone who applies there is qualified and an expert in their field, so it's fine. But in order to make sure that the different European nations who contribute are represented, they need a system. You know, and sometimes our organizations, they're not perfect, and without some sort of guidelines or system, they fall out of achieving other objectives that are sometimes bigger than, you know, how we alone feel. If you feel that you're the token Indian person or the token, you know, white female at a table, yeah, you can feel that way, but you should try to dispel that in yourself. Let, as you said earlier, let the other people think whatever they want and just know your own value. And quotas help large organizations achieve certain larger goals, I think.
I think it's not only because we all mention quota, and that's one thing, and but it's also about, you know, D&I strategies, having a D&I officers, looking at the numbers, looking at business case. Yeah, you can have them all in place, but if you don't feel it, if it's not your intrinsic need to change, the cultural change about which you're talking about, which is one of the most difficult things to do in an organization. But if it's not there because you believe in it, then yeah, then over 15, 20 years, you guys will be still talking about reaching gender parity, and we've done everything we've done for nothing. And I remember, well, this year we looked in our organization at a new strategy on diversity and inclusion, and I put a large part of it together. And I was talking to our CEO, and I told him, well, you know, here's the business case. And he told me, I'm not interested in the business case. We don't do it because of a business case. We do it because it's the right thing to do. And this resonated with me so strongly, and not only with me, but also with some other people who are at the table. It's really, and I quote him again, it's the right thing to do. And you need to believe that if you want to create a change.
I think it's the only way to be able to achieve inclusion.
Exactly.
Right? Otherwise, you just stop at diversity.
Yeah.
But without inclusion, it's not enough.
I think our message is clear. A quotum or a Purple Friday, those are good initiatives to raise awareness, but it's the first step, and you're not done if you've done that.
Yeah, it's just a conversation starter.
Yes. Now we have another question. Some of us represent a minority, some of us are, not Dutch. Do we have any advice for the majorities on how, and then reflecting from your own minority, how do you want to be treated? Do we have any tips or do's or don'ts?
Well, I would like to start with saying, please think about how you belong to a minority yourself, because I think, as I stated before, every one of us belongs to a minority. So maybe you're just not a minority that is disadvantaged, but it does not mean you belong to one. And then also the other thing is what is very important also in preparing this talk. I thought like the starting point should always be like, how would I like to be treated?
Yeah.
And treat people that way. And then you're already like, you have a very good starting point.
Yeah, agreed.
Okay, then lastly, to end this panel on a positive note, we've come a long way. Some things have changed tremendously, but there's also some work to do, and we're good, but maybe we're not great yet. Do we have some things that do we have some positive developments that we've seen on diversity and inclusion that we're really excited about, or upcoming things that we want to share?
Well, yeah, there are a few, and you can talk about them at different levels, macro and micro level. So I think the important changes are, for example, a legislative level, where the Netherlands is really behind, putting laws in place. I think the fact that last year, I believe the Staatssecretaris Mona Keizer has signed the agreement on women in digital, which is for me the first document where I see that member states of the European Union are saying women are disadvantaged in the ICT world, women are paid less in the ICT world, and we are going to do something about it. And the Netherlands has signed a document, and right now there are discussions about how we can come to our commitments. I think that's a tremendous step. On the other hand, though, I have to say that the rejection of the National Action Plan on Diversity within the universities, which took place this year in the second chamber, that's quite a step back. So it shows also that we still really need to do something about it, because while you guys at the universities are giving the signals that things need to change, our parliament is saying not yet, not in the way that's proposed right now. So those are two things. Well. How do you call it in Dutch? Vaderschapsverlof, parental leave for men, which has been increased, is another one. And the fact that we have this discussion here with you guys, organized by you, the young generation, I think that's also a really, really big step. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think that is indeed very hopeful that we're discussing these things now in the TU Delft. 10 years ago, this would not be imaginable. So I think that's a huge step forward.
Yeah. We have to just keep the awareness going.
Yeah.
And keep changing.
Yes, sure. Positive note. I think for all, we agreed that we were asking how many people are joining in. You said about 100. If just one walks away with more courage, understanding how people think, the other one also acknowledge maybe they're biased or want to change themselves, and just and in other ways be who you want to be, also keep that up. for me, like you were saying, the Netherlands are okay, but being in a wheelchair, I regularly visit the United States. ADA's been there for 30 years, so how can you aid people in a wheelchair? And the Netherlands is way behind that. Just 2 years ago, we signed an agreement, being the last one in Europe. So that's a good thing, but the things I encounter, not being able to enter some buildings, always encountering difficulties, but we're getting there. For me, it's still a long way, and I'm not an advocate for all the other ones, but being here for me is a step forward. And if anyone's out there that has a disability, visible or not visible, yeah, things are possible. I mean, it can be done. You can achieve it, and it takes time, but keep the faith, you will get there.
Yeah, I think the fact that we're all having this dialogue and exchanging our viewpoints is a tremendous asset to the future. And the fact is, yes, a lot of it has to come from the top down, but and changing an organizational culture or picking your workplace based on an organization's culture is challenging, but you control your viewpoint and your daily attitude and what you bring to the table. So really, each one who's listening to this, you're the agent of change that will help enable our organizations to be the best that they can be with you working with us. So yeah, we're kind of relying on you. We're the panel, but in fact, it's the rest of you who are the agent of change.
Okay, well, then I'm looking to my audience to see if we have any final questions. And it's remaining rather silent. So then I want to thank my panelists. Thank you, Kay, Jose, Elly, Julien, and Oana. Thank you for the wonderful conversation we had. Also, thank everyone who sent in questions online. And thank you, VSV, for hosting an event. I like the evolution of this event. It keeps on changing every year, being more inclusive every year. So thank you, VSV, for organizing these talks. I think it's truly an achievement that we have at least 100 people listening and talking about it and thinking about it. And then lastly, I want to say, if you are experiencing exclusion or anything in this topic that you cannot solve, there are academic counselors and there is a diversity officer that you can reach out to. Please do so, because your studies time is supposed to be a fun time. So if it's not, please reach out to people who can help solve it. Then I think we're now ready for Nadine, who will close.
So thank you, Julia. So today I'm really impressed by what we've seen today. We've had amazing workshops, we had great speakers, and of course, last but not least, we have had an amazing panel discussion. I'd like to thank Christine Darden. I would like to thank Michiel van Dorst for being with us today. And of course, Kai, Jose, Elly, Julien, and Oana, and Julia for moderating the panel discussion. Thank you. I'm also very grateful to our sponsors. You can see them there. You won't have missed them. And I also want to express my gratitude towards the committee, because without you, it wouldn't have been possible to organize this online event. Thank you. Then, if there would have been one thing that you might have learned from today, what would that then be? From my part, I would say, don't judge and no bias. Don't judge on how someone looks, not on how someone talks, and also not on their abilities, because you don't know what opportunities one might have got. I would encourage you to collaborate, connect, and communicate. And with that, I would like to end the day with one quote, and it is, "Alone you can climb a mountain, but only together we can reach the moon." So we are done for today, but we are not done yet, because tomorrow at 5 there will be a networking event. So I would like to invite all panelists to join us. I would like to invite you at home to join us as well, because if you have any questions, feel free to ask them. You can also contact us. I hope to see you all tomorrow. Thank you, and I hope that you enjoyed today. Thank you.